In the boundless desert, a tiny black dot lay prone on a sand dune. Edouard tapped the controller on his wrist. Damn it, why does it have to malfunction now? With a soft beep, the controller's smart AI came back online. Activate camouflage mode. With his voice command, the cloak on his back began to change color, eventually blending perfectly into the dune. As a top special operative, he was carrying out his 210th mission since joining the Resistance. Every mission, he would infiltrate deep behind enemy lines alone, and every time he completed it flawlessly. Where's the convoy now? He asked, raising a high-powered telescope and looking toward the horizon. His mission this time was to destroy an Imperial Reinforced Regiment's command vehicle. Static. They set off 2 hours ago. According to calculations, they are now about 70 kilometers from the cambered area. The voice from the earpiece was not very clear. That means the swarm will be here soon. As he spoke, he raised the telescope and increased the magnification. In the distance, a few scattered flying objects were heading toward him. These palm-sized arrow-shaped gadgets were Type 2 swarm drones. They flew fast and had powerful detection capabilities, especially on the bare dunes where even the slightest movement would be spotted. Though they had no attack capability combined with the precise firepower of ground forces, they were still the nightmare that Resistance guerrillas feared the most. Often the swarm would pass over, followed by fierce mortar bombardment. But Edouard was not worried at all. He wore the finest personal camouflage cloak made of countless scale-like display materials. Under the control of a smart AI, it could optically blend completely with the surrounding sand, making it impossible to tell him apart even if he lay right in front of the enemy. Static. Signal interference in the cambered area is getting stronger. Communication is about to. Static. Operative. Good. Good luck to me, he finished. He finished the sentence that the communicator had left unfinished, then looked up at the sky. An abnormal star glittered even in daylight. He knew it was the Galactic Empire battleship Mecha in synchronous orbit. 3 years ago, the newly independent Duosei star state was attacked without warning by the Empire, and its fleet was annihilated. Since then, the Resistance's communications had been suppressed across all frequencies. In the early stages of the war, the Resistance was forced into repeated retreats. Even so, after 3 years of bitter fighting and successful use of terrain and tactics, they gradually gained some victories and finally launched a full-scale counterattack. You won't be strutting around much longer, Edouard muttered, taking a last look at the approaching swarm. Then he lowered his head, burying his face in the shadow of his cloak to evade the incoming reconnaissance. In the shadow of the cloak, he slipped his hand into the sand and grasped the electromagnetic rifle buried there. This rifle was a birthday gift from his adoptive father, the leader of the Resistance, given on his 16th birthday, one of the few high-tech gadgets his adoptive father could give his child. He hadn't liked it back then, until he fired his first shot. At that time, he was on his way to a village carrying a message from his adoptive father to the Resistance officers there. But when he arrived, Imperial troops had already occupied the village. Several soldiers were burning, looting, and killing. The old, weak women and children were already lying in pools of blood. Those Imperial soldiers were gathered around a campfire nearby, cooking and chatting happily. He hid in the shadows, his heart burning with rage. Raising the electromagnetic rifle, he aimed at the unsuspecting Imperial soldiers and clamped down on the trigger. A magazine of 60 bullets was emptied in an instant. When he saw the empty chamber alert blinking on the rifle, he snapped out of it and released his finger. He rushed forward, grabbed a rock, and smashed it onto the dying enemies. Only when all the Imperial soldiers lay motionless did he collapse on the ground, gasping for breath. The thrill of revenge made him tremble uncontrollably. A faint buzzing sound pulled him back from his memory. He knew it was swarm recon drones passing overhead. Edouard raised his head, lifted the telescope, and watched the convoy approaching in the distance. The insignia of the Imperial Mountain Cat Regiment was clearly visible on the vehicle bodies. These troop carriers were massive, hovering half a meter above the ground. Their armor was so sturdy that neither electromagnetic rifles nor portable mortars could penetrate them. But he was not worried at all, because he had some special pheromone rounds. Provided by the research department, these bullets carried pheromones in their warheads that could drive the sandworms deep beneath the desert insane. Adult female sandworms could reach 20 meters in length. Their huge hard maws could bite through a transport skimmer in one crunch. Covered in scales, their bodies were tough enough to resist electromagnetic rifle fire to some degree. Those colossal creatures also had an extremely acute sense of smell, capable of identifying prey within 10 kilometers. They swam through the sand at incredible speed, and even the massive transport skimmers could not escape them. They were also extremely vengeful, showing no mercy to intruders who destroyed their larvae or eggs. Last time, in order to collect pheromone raw materials for the research department, Edouard had gone deep into the sandworm nest to look for eggs and was caught on the spot. During his desperate escape, he accidentally broke an egg, provoking several sandworms to chase him for dozens of kilometers. If not for the extreme speed of his flying motorcycle, he would have died in their jaws. He dug the electromagnetic sniper rifle out of the sand in front of him and adjusted it. Leaning on the dune, he took 5 green rounds from his chest pocket and pushed them one by one into the magazine. The pheromone rounds were precious. He had to hit his target from 5 kilometers away. Watching the Imperial transport convoy through his scope, he spat to the side. This time I'll spare you. He adjusted the crosshair onto the command vehicle at the rear of the convoy, made final corrections, and waited for the target to enter range. He did not understand why the commander had ordered him to let the Mountain Cat regiment pass and only destroy the command. Orders were orders. He pushed those thoughts out of his mind, held his breath, and pulled the trigger 5 times. Then he clearly saw 4 small green dots appear on the black vehicle at the places where they hit. Got it. He didn't mind the round that he had no idea where it went because he knew that one hit was enough. He withdrew the electromagnetic rifle and quickly buried it, then lay face down in the sand, without moving, trying to hide from the swarm that would soon come to investigate. The shots must have exposed his direction, but as long as the swarm did not detect his exact location, he could retreat safely. Inside the command vehicle, a young man, wearing an Imperial Lieutenant Colonel uniform, frowned at the 2 red arrows on the operational map, one on the left and one on the right moving southward. Lieutenant Colonel Fengxi, you have no need to worry at all. As long as the War Bear Regiment and my Mountain Cat Regiment arrive at their designated positions on time, they will form a pincer with the defenders at Ryurta and encircle the resistance. Victory belongs to the Empire. The major finished with a military salute. He knew that Ryurta was a wedge thrust into the resistance-controlled area, and due to its high terrain it held great strategic importance. It must not be taken by the enemy under any circumstances. The 2 reinforced regiments, one striking from the left and one from the right, could both relieve the siege of Ryurta and encircle the resistance. But the data on the operational map still made him uneasy. That is not what worries me, Major. Pointing to the marked ambush sites on the map, he said, our supply convoys to Ryurta have been attacked by sandworms 8 times out of 10. Isn't that frequency too high? Lieutenant Colonel, this is exactly the sandworms' breeding season. During this season they are highly aggressive. We tried changing routes, but it made no difference, the Major said. The Major said this, but in his heart, he was full of contempt for his young superior, who was only 20 years old. Has the surveillance system on the starship reported anything new? Fengxi lit a cigarette and asked. The warship Masuwa in synchronous orbit was monitoring the Empire's ever-shrinking area of influence around the clock. No matter how hard he tried, he could not understand why resistance forces would suddenly appear at strategic points and attack them. No major military movements by the resistance have been detected, the Major said flatly. I still feel a little. Fengxi exhaled a plume of smoke as if trying to expel the worry in his heart. Report. The War Bear Regiment has sent an urgent message. They are under attack by a large number of sandworms. The communicator said. What are the casualties? Fengxi sat down. 75 wounded, 31 killed, and heavy losses of vehicles. The communicator lowered his head and read the report. Not good. Fengxi crossed his legs and fell into deep thought. The Major opened the window, trying to let the smoke out. Lieutenant Colonel, you needn't worry so much. The resistance has only about 3,000 men. Ryurta's garrison is only 700, and they only dare to surround it, not attack. Last time I let them escape because of my poor command, do I admit that. But this time we will roll over them with the strength of 2 reinforced regiments. The resistance will definitely be annihilated. The Major waved his hand, trying to drive off the smoke drifting over. You are overthinking, Major. The Empire sent me here, neither to replace you nor to take your credit. I'm just an observer here to record your achievements. While saying that, Fengxi thought to himself, with all your advantages in weapons, supplies, and manpower, after 3 years your territory has only shrunk, and now you are cornered around a few starports. Fighting like this, you are a disgrace to the military. As the Major sat down by the window and was about to say something, a burst of green smoke exploded on his chest, followed by 4 dull thuds. 2 o'clock. Enemy attack, the communicator reported. The panicked Major quickly closed the window and asked, how many enemies are there? We haven't found the enemy yet. Based on the trajectory, it probably came from the 2 o'clock direction, the communicator reported. Send 2 swarm squads to reconnoiter in that direction. The Major patted his chest, trying to wipe off the green slime. What is this? Fengxi leaned over to look at the green slime on his chest, then his face changed, and he shouted, take it off now. Everyone abandoned the vehicle. The words were barely spoken when the ground began to shake violently, as if by magic. Report. We are detecting something underground approaching fast. The communicator reported. Stop the vehicle. Everybody out. Fengxi roared. Everyone turned to look at the Major, who was angrily stripping off his clothes. His face was red, and he finally squeezed out 2 words, abandon. Vehicle. Yes. The vehicle came to a sudden halt. Fengxi scrambled out and ran into the distance. Looking back, he saw the Major still clutching his clothes and shouted angrily, throw it away. And the gloves too. Do you have a death wish? The Major was stunned for a moment, then threw the jacket and gloves behind him and stumbled after Fengxi toward it. The vibrations grew stronger. Fengxi found it hard just to keep his balance, so he stopped running, sat down on the sand, and turned to look toward the source of the shaking. Where the ground shook, the sand bulged. A large mound moved rapidly across the desert, growing bigger and bigger as it approached. At last, an enormous sandworm burst through the wave of sand, leaped into the air, and dived back under. It must be pheromones. That bullet carried some kind of pheromone. It infuriated the nearby sandworms, Fengxi said to the major, pointing at the surging sand wave. He couldn't understand why. Reports about these pheromones had been mentioned once or twice in previous battles, yet these commanders had not only ignored them, but didn't even know about them. The officers and soldiers who had escaped from the command vehicle were all staring at the massive, shifting mound, their faces filled with horror. The large mound moved swiftly to the position of the command vehicle. The giant sandworm broke through the sand wave, leapt into the air, and shaking its scales, let out a sharp hiss. The colossal beast opened its enormous maw full of interlocking teeth and swallowed the command vehicle in one bite. Everyone stay still. Besides smell, it can identify prey through ground vibrations. Fengxi extended a hand to signal everyone to stay where they were. A violent tremor shook the ground once more. The sand around the major's discarded jacket began to churn violently. A piercing shriek echoed as a colossal sandworm erupted from the desert floor, only to plunge back into the sands, sending a blinding storm of dust and grit into the air. Order the troops to hold their fire. Don't provoke it further, it should leave on its own, Alphonse said to the radio man. The radio man stared at the major, looking utterly bewildered. Do as he says, the major said, rubbing his brow as if to dispel some annoyance. Major, I strongly advise we abort this operation. We should have the Warbear Regiment fall back and link up with us. After regrouping, we can retreat to the city of Aperta and devise a new strategic plan. Alphonse stated, addressing the major. Lieutenant Colonel, we possess several times the enemy's manpower and superior weaponry. We even have our warships stationed in synchronous orbit above us. With such overwhelming advantages, you wish to retreat. This is nothing short of cowardice. The major retorted, his voice filled with indignation. Major, the rebels first surrounded Rierta without attacking, then cut off their supply lines to force us into a rescue. Now the Warbear Regiment has lost its mobility. Can you not see the pattern? This is a textbook example of a besiege the city strike the relief force tactic. As he spoke, Alphonse pulled out another cigarette and patted his pockets for a lighter. Even so, we still have several times their numbers and superior equipment. Strike our relief force. Are they even capable of such a feat? The major scoffed coldly. And what if the shipborne surveillance systems in our synchronous orbit failed to detect the rebels' troop movements? Alphonse asked, taking a lighter from the radio man, who had stepped forward. He lit his cigarette and spoke slowly. This is blasphemy against the great empire. The major pointed a trembling finger at him, his face flushed with anger. All right, let's set that aside. We've lost so many supplies that they've likely been seized by the rebels. Our supposed advantage in weaponry may not even exist. Alphonse exhaled a plume of smoke, his gaze fixed firmly on the major. I see it now. You are just trying to stall our advance so the Warbear Regiment can steal the credit. Don't think I don't know you and their commander were classmates. The major shot back. Oh, if that's what you believe, Major, then there's nothing more I can do. Please arrange a vehicle to take me back to Aperta. My work here is done. Alphonse sighed, flicking his cigarette, but onto the sand, disheartened that a frontline commander would waste his energy on such petty suspicions. The tremors had ceased. The massive dune that symbolized death had vanished without a trace. Alphonse jumped into the light shuttle car prepared for him. Major will be heading back to Aperta now. I will faithfully report your bravery and loyalty to the Imperial Military High Command. With that, he rendered a crisp military salute. The major returned the salute. Lieutenant Colonel, you just wait in the rear for the good news of our victory. Ignoring the biting sarcasm, Alphonse gestured for the driver to leave. On a nearby dune, Edward watched through his binoculars as the men scrambled from the command vehicle. He muttered to himself, so he got away. Command Center, this is A-19 special operative. Target has been eliminated, but the commander has escaped. Requesting permission to engage. The only answer was the hiss of static. He dug the electromagnetic rifle out of the sand and set it up again. From his pocket, he retrieved an ordinary high-explosive round, licked the projectile, and loaded it into the chamber. In his countless battles, he had gunned down over 100 commanders. A legend had spread through the Imperial military, whispering that the raging sands of this planet could coalesce into human form, punishing the tyrants who ruled the world with the planet's own strength. They had given this specter a terrifying name, the Sand Demon. Just need to take out the one with 2 stars. He aimed the electromagnetic rifle at the man sitting in the sand smoking. He increased the magnification, and a shockingly familiar face filled his sights. This is... He was so stunned, he nearly squeezed the trigger. He adjusted the magnification again, the man's features now crystal clear. That nose, that jaw, those eyes. And the chestnut hair peeking out from under the cap. How can he look exactly like me? He thought, his hands trembling as he reactivated his communicator. Command Center. This is A-19. Target eliminated, but commander escaped. Permission to engage. SSSHHH. The only reply was more static. His adoptive father had once told him that 20 years ago when the rebellion first began he had been found abandoned in a corner of a hospital in Canrad. Thinking about the man's chestnut hair, a color rarely seen in the entire galaxy, he was now certain that this man must be a blood relative of his. With this realization, he found it impossible to pull the trigger on an officer who was his exact double. As he hesitated, the officer leapt into a light shuttle car and sped off in the opposite direction of the main force, quickly moving out of range. Well then, you're the highest-ranking target now. He swung the electromagnetic rifle, fixed the crosshairs on an officer who wasn't wearing a jacket, and squeezed the trigger. Got him. He watched as a massive hole exploded in the officer's chest, who then fell stiffly backward. The soldiers around the officer scrambled for cover, shouting in panic, "The sand demon is here." He quickly buried the rifle and buried himself in the sand as well. Back in Aperta, Alphonse, who had just returned from the front lines, was in his office writing his report. A knock at the door interrupted his thoughts. He put down his pen. Enter. A young blonde-haired, blue-eyed officer walked in and saluted. Lieutenant Colonel Alphonse. Major, what brings you here? Shouldn't you be at your regiment? Alphonse stood up and extended a friendly handshake. Senior, I'm just a fringe member at the regiment. All of us transferred from the Imperial Army are treated as thorns in the side by the local troops. He grasped Alphonse's hand and gave him a friendly embrace. Tell me about it. I was just sent back by that major from the Lynx Regiment. Alphonse offered him a cigarette. Actually, the latest report from the front just came in. That major from the Lynx Regiment was hit by a rebel sniper. He didn't make it. Yang accepted the cigarette, lit it, and took a deep drag. So soon. Who's in command now? Alphonse gestured for Yang to sit, and pulled out a holographic tactical display, activating it. The deputy commander is in charge. He's ordered the troops to continue with the original plan. They are currently in this position. Yang pointed to a spot on the map. They crippled the War Bear Regiment's mobility, but didn't use the same tactic against the Lynx Regiment. The two forces are so far apart that if the rebels were to attack the Lynx Regiment, the War Bear Regiment would be in no position to reinforce them. But why didn't the starships detect the rebel movements? Alphonse pondered, letting ash fall to the floor. Yang knew his senior's habit of deep thought, and remained silent, simply pushing the ashtray closer to him. His senior was famous at the military academy. In the final mock battle of his freshman year, he had defeated a junior. Over the next 2 years, he had fully displayed his innate military genius, continuously setting records in the strategy classes war games. It was even said that an old general once came to challenge him. They fought a fierce and evenly matched battle on the sand table. In the end, Alphonse intentionally left an opening and conceded to save the general's face. Damn, Aperta is in danger. How many garrison troops do we have? Alphonse exclaimed, enlarging the map and starting to mark positions and calculate distances. Rierda was to the south of Aperta, and the starport was to the north. It all clicked. Only one regiment. Yang stubbed out his cigarette in the ashtray. The rebels crippled the War Bear Regiment's mobility to prevent them from reinforcing the Lynx Regiment. They left the Lynx Regiment's mobility intact because they need those Imperial troop transports to move their own forces. The Lynx Regiment is likely walking right into a trap right now. Alphonse tossed the tactical display onto the table and pointed it out to Yang. Rierda is at the southernmost point with Aperta to its north. Originally, both regiments were to advance simultaneously from the east and west. Now that the War Bear Regiment on the east has lost its mobility, the Lynx Regiment on the west is advancing deep into enemy territory alone. If the Lynx Regiment is ambushed, the War Bear Regiment is powerless to help. Then why not set up an ambush on both sides? Yang stood up. Because they don't have enough troops. I estimate the rebels have around 5,000 men. Alphonse rubbed his temples. Yang said, this is far more than what the headquarters estimated. The complete battle plan is this: after using a force larger than the Lynx Regiment to annihilate it, they will use the captured Imperial transport vehicles to maneuver part of their troops to the rear of the War Bear Regiment, then coordinate with the remaining forces to attack from front and rear. Thus the War Bear Regiment will also be doomed. Alphonse tapped the table and said, where did they get so many weapons and ammunition? Yang said as the communicator on his wrist rang. Staff Officer Yang, a battle report from the Lynx Regiment has arrived. Go ahead. Yang extinguished the cigarette he had just lit and said, the Lynx Regiment encountered a massive ambush by the rebels 70 kilometers from Runa, suffering heavy casualties. The remaining troops have all surrendered. Yang turned off the communicator and silently looked at him. Isn't this enough weapons? Alphonse said, pushing the battle map over. Look, after they finish off the War Bear Regiment, which has no mobility, will they stop? Alphonse pointed at a red mark repeatedly marked on the map. Losing this line would be fatal. I need to hurry back to the regiment headquarters to report. Yang wiped his sweat. I don't think they will listen. The urgent task now is to withdraw to the ship. With these aristocratic lords, Aperta is doomed. After saying that, Alphonse stared blankly out the window at the rolling dark clouds. Edward rode a flying motorcycle through the war zone where the battle had ended and stopped in front of a cluster of tents. He got off, brushed the sand off his clothes, and walked toward the largest tent. Entering the tent, Edward stood at attention and saluted. General Barr, a 19 Special Operative Edward Elric reporting for duty. All right, no strangers here. General Barr waved his hand. Dad, I saw a man today who looked exactly like me with 2 stars on his shoulders. Edward said, running to the cabinet to rummage for food. General Barr paused, his hand marking the map, then slowly said, that man might be your twin brother. Edward stopped tearing the jerky. Twin brother? I have a brother. Why didn't you tell me sooner? I almost shot my brother today. The rapid-fire questions stunned Barr. He said, you never asked. From the time you started school, I told you that you're 20 years old, and you've never even asked who your biological parents are. How could you expect your adoptive father to bring it up first? Then he straightened up and began searching through his military bag. He was left speechless. His adoptive father had indeed never hidden his background. He recalled how his adoptive father had forced him at the age of 10 to read obscure strategic history books, made him practice tactical maneuvers on the sand table whenever free, and even arranged unknown tactical training with instructors. He had never been neglected because he was adopted. This is the birth document from the hospital where you were found. They evacuated too hastily. You were likely left behind, not abandoned. General Barr handed him a document in a sealed bag. He felt ashamed of his earlier rashness. His adoptive father had kept this document with him, waiting for the day to come. Brother Edward, did the new information bombs work well? Alina lifted the tent flap and walked in. He turned to see his adopted sister Alina. Completely different from him, who loved reading, this girl had always been tomboyish and enjoyed taking things apart. When his adoptive father found he couldn't control her, he simply handed her over to the research department. Over time, the little girl actually managed to create some things of practical combat value. They worked a little too well. This time a really big one came out. Edward folded the document and hurriedly stuffed it into his pocket. Alina, please step outside. I need to assign a mission to a 19 Special Operative. General Barr stopped his daughter's coquettishness. Oomph. Alina turned and stormed out of the tent. Edward, this time you go to this position. General Barr pointed to a red mark repeatedly marked on the map. He continued, cut off the supply line between Aperta and the spaceport. Remember, only out no end. After destroying the transport vehicles, mark them on the tactical map and inform the logistics department to clean up the battlefield. Additionally, you need to hold this area until our main force annihilates the Imperial Warbear Regiment and then moves north to join you. About 3 days. Edward stuffed jerky into his mouth and said, what if the starships send Marines to reinforce Aperta? I don't think that will happen. The Empire will no longer support the governor of Dosa's star. General Barr said, grabbing his hand that was still reaching for jerky. I know you don't like politics, but you have to learn even if you don't like it. This position will be yours in the future. Let Alina take it. I don't want it, Edward said, trying to free his hand, but felt the resolute strength in the general's grip. He looked up at the general and met his firm, yet sorrowful eyes. I'll do my best. Don't look at me like that. I'm not used to it, he said. You brat. Get serious. What's wrong with Alina? The general let go of Edward. I don't think there's anything wrong with Alina. I just feel I'm still young, he said insincerely. Who wouldn't like the young and lovely Alina? But the war on Dosa's star was still ongoing, and no one knew how long it would continue. Even if this plan succeeded and Dosa's gained independence, the Imperial fleet in the surrounding star regions would stir up trouble again. He didn't want to get together with Alina during the war. The general waved his hand to cut him off. Get out, go carry out the mission. Edward fled the tent, but before he took 2 steps, Alina grabbed his arm. Brother Edward, where are you going this time? Alina asked. Her sickly sweet voice made Edward's head feel like it would explode. He said, oh, it's a mission secret. Take me. I've also participated in combat training. Alina clung tighter like a snake. Suddenly he stood at attention and saluted, shouting, hello, General Barr. Taking advantage of the loosened grip, Edward pulled his arm free and ran away with Alina's curses behind him. He ran to where he had parked the flying motorcycle and found it missing. Looking around, he stopped the soldier carrying supplies and asked, there was a flying motorcycle parked here. Where is it? Oh, a sergeant from the logistics department just rode it away. In front of the logistics tent, Edward was angrily questioning the logistics sergeant. Why did you disassemble my flying motorcycle like this? I have a mission to carry out. The sergeant said innocently. Miss Alina told me you were going on a mission tomorrow and asked me to hurry and clean the engine. Edward looked helplessly at the motorcycle parts on the ground, wondering where to get another one. Hey buddy, want to ride? He looked toward the voice and saw a pure black Imperial cavalry motorcycle with Alina sitting on it, dressed in military uniform and a cloak. Miss Alina, I'm going on a special mission, not a picnic. Edward said helplessly. I'm ready. Ammunition, food, water, all prepared. Alina saluted from the cavalry motorcycle. Sergeant, please go tell the general. Alina, you sit in the back. Edward jumped onto the cavalry motorcycle and started the engine. So, a 19 special operative, where is our destination? Alina sat behind him, arms around his waist. Target Cheers Grand Canyon, Edward said, twisting the throttle. The Child's Rift was the only route from Starport to the city of Aperta. The transport vehicles were far too heavy to take any alternate path forced to skim the ground along this road, making the rift the most vulnerable point for an ambush. On either side of the wide transport road, sheer rock walls rose straight up, bearing the distinct mark of a geological. Alina, peering through her binoculars at the rift, curled herself into a tight ball, pulling her cloak as far over her body as possible. Edward had been gone on reconnaissance for 4 hours now. Her intense curiosity and sheer boredom finally got the better of her, defying Edward's orders as she pressed the communicator button. Edward, do you copy? There was no response. The silence filled her with unease. Since that's the case, I'll go look for him. With that thought, she hesitated, no longer bringing up the combat map on her wrist console. There must be a few Imperial soldiers guarding the sides of the rift. Edward's communicator signal last appeared. I'm here. So he should be on the western side of the rift now. She patted the motorcycle hidden under a pile of sand, checked her electromagnetic rifle, and headed towards the western side of the rift. Meanwhile, Edward lay frustrated on the sandy ground on the eastern side of the rift. He had been staring at the small fort in front of him for over 2 hours. When did these twin forts get here? They're not marked on any map. Due to the suppression of warships in synchronous orbit, the Resistance couldn't update their combat maps in time. These 2 small forts were positioned on either side of the canyon, each providing rapid-fire support for the other if one was attacked. Edward, do you copy? I copy, Alina. Stay exactly where you are. He tapped the sputtering, flickering controller, then looked back up at the fort. Can't go any further. He thought, opening the sight on his helmet and magnifying the view of the fort, studying it. The small caliber energy cannon on top of the fort drooped downwards. Through the firing slits at its base, he could vaguely make out the shadow of soldiers moving inside. Can't sneak past it. Even if this fort has blind spots, crossing would expose me to the western fort. If only I could temporarily blind the western fort. As he thought this, he increased the magnification of his sight, looking towards the western fort. Huh, what's that? He magnified the view further and spotted a small, oddly shaped mound of sand on a dune far beyond the western fort. It wriggled a few times, then stopped. Then wriggled again and stopped once more. He quickly opened his communicator, asking anxiously, Alina, where are you? I'm on the western side of the rift at. Wait, let me check. Alina looked at the combat map on her wrist. The entire area was divided into a grid of small squares. She quickly located her coordinates, remembering that letters further along the alphabet meant closer to the east, and larger numbers meant closer to the south. She said, I'm at row C, column 9 on the combat map. Yes, on the sand dune near position C9. Her voice came through the communicator. Don't move another inch. I can see you. I told you to stay put. What are you doing out there? Edward set up his electromagnetic rifle ready to fire and draw the western fort's fire to cover Alina's retreat. I called you and you didn't answer. I was worried about you, Alina said, popping her head out from under her camouflage and looking around. Get your head down. Your camouflage is too light. I can see you perfectly clearly from the eastern side of the canyon. Edward glanced nervously at the western fort, terrified that Alina might be spotted. Her small face quickly ducked back under the sandbag. The color of the sandbag slowly faded until it blended seamlessly with the surrounding sand. Was it really that obvious? Alina's voice was a bit dejected. For a newbie, you're doing pretty well. Now slowly make your way back to a concealed spot. No, wait a minute. I just thought of an idea. Edward rubbed his nose and laid out his plan. On the western side of the rift, Alina lay under the camouflage netting, struggling to contain her excitement. Edward, are you in position yet? Her voice was getting impatient. Princess, I'm crawling forward here. You've urged me on 3 times in the last 10 minutes. Edward's voice also sounded annoyed. Edward, my hands are shaking, Alina said, placing her left hand over her trembling right hand, only to have both hands shake uncontrollably. Oh, that's perfectly normal. Alina, check your rifle and ammunition. Check them a few more times. Edward's sigh of resignation also came through the communicator. Alina began checking her electromagnetic rifle and signal flares over and over again. Finally, she just grabbed a handful of sand and started counting the grains. I'm in position. After you fire, retreat to the other side of the dune immediately. Let's go. Upon hearing Edward's command, Alina immediately picked up her electromagnetic rifle, lifted a corner of the camouflage net, and fired all the signal flares in her magazine into the sand pit ahead. Then she dropped the net and started moving towards the other side of the dune. The small plumes of sand kicked up by the gunfire in the pit caught the attention of the western fort. The small caliber energy cannon on its top swiveled half a circle, aiming directly at the sand pit. Soon a deep rumbling sound grew louder, followed by several large, rapidly moving sand mounds on the desert. Alina had already moved to the other side of the dune, but had no intention of obeying orders to lie low. She didn't want to miss the spectacle she had just created. The massive sand mounds grew larger and larger until several enormous sandworms burst out from them, lunging eagerly towards the sand pit. The worms tangled together, hissing and thrashing at each other. The pit churned like a boiling pot, throwing up a blinding storm of sand. Wow, 3 queens. Alina thought, pushing her arm deep into the sand to brace herself against the tremors caused by the sandworms. A series of violent explosions echoed across the canyon. She turned towards the sound and saw the western fort reduced to a pile of rubble. Inside the eastern fort, Edward was catching his breath, gripping a blood-stained dagger. Looks like our troubles aren't over yet. Once the sandworms retreat, I need you to check the bodies at the western fort, Edward instructed, pushing a corpse off the control console. What's wrong? Are you hurt? Alina's anxious voice came through the communicator. No, it's just that this fort only had 2 soldiers and 1 speeder bike. I'm worried the patrol from this side is out on a sweep. Edward sheathed his dagger and began scrolling through the surveillance system on the control panel. Eastern Fort, this is the patrol. We heard explosions. What's going on over there? A constant stream of inquiries came from the communicator on the dead soldier. Edward ignored it. There are 7 bodies here and the wreckage of about 5 or 6 speeder bikes. Get to the Eastern Fort as fast as you can. Edward felt a surge of impatience. If the patrol returned now, he'd have to abandon the fort. If the fort was lost, and they called for reinforcements, his guerrilla mission would become infinitely more difficult. None of the bikes are usable. I'm going to have to run. Alina's voice was tinged with disappointment. Then you better start running now. Get to the fort's control room and aim the energy cannon at the 1 o'clock position. That's the direction they'll likely come from. I'm going up top to reload the cannon. I'll man the cannon, but where will you be? The cannon has a blind spot at 1 o'clock. I'm going to find a high point and set up a crossfire. Edward finished reloading the cannon, ran out of the fort, and sprinted towards a nearby sand dune. A gust of wind swept across, carrying sand that pattered against the electromagnetic rifle. The 2 colossal moons of Doxas cast a cold silver light. Edward lay prone on the dune, his gaze fixed on the horizon, where black and gold converged. Where are you? Edward pressed Alina again. I just descended into the canyon. You've urged me 3 times in 10 minutes. Alina replied, breathless. The success of this mission hinges entirely on whether you can reach the fortlet before they return. If you're nervous, go check your weapons and ammunition. Check them several times. Alina tossed his own words back at him. If that fails, you can count the grains of sand. Edward chuckled at her retort. Were you just counting? Alina's labored breathing came through the communicator. On the horizon, a plume of yellow dust rose. They're coming. 20 kilometers, 3 hoverbikes, 5 targets. You have 13 minutes, Edward analyzed. I'm almost at the top. Alina's voice trembled. Damn it. Are you climbing the cliff? Why not go around? Edward hadn't expected Alina to take such a risk to save time. Shut up. Say one more word, and I'll fire a shot at you first. Edward fell silent. In position. A mechanical whir came from the communicator as the small-bore energy cannon on the fortlet raised its barrel, aiming at the 1 o'clock position. Don't fire yet. Wait for my command. We'll hit the lead vehicle first, Edward said calmly, waiting for the enemy to enter his precalculated dead angle. Fire. 3 blue energy bolts streaked across the night sky, with a soft hum, their momentum formidable. Arcs of electricity crackled faintly around the azure projectiles. The lead hoverbike was struck, heated, disintegrating into a shower of wreckage. The remaining 2 immediately began evasive maneuvers. More energy bolts shot from the fortlet, plasma splashing around the hoverbikes, stirring up curtains of sand. Single shots, 10-second intervals. You have 4 rounds left. Whoosh. Another energy bolt detonated beside a hoverbike. The Imperial soldier on that bike leaped off, rolled on the ground, scrambled up, and ran toward the reverse slope of a dune. The 2 soldiers on the following bike followed suit. Whoosh. The energy bolt struck the dune, erupting in a net of blue arcs. They've taken cover. I can't see them. Alina's anxious voice came through. Don't worry. Every step goes according to plan. I'm waiting for my chance. Concealed on the high ground, Edward had a clear view of the Imperial soldiers' every move on the reverse slope. He saw one soldier take a portable mortar from his comrade's pack and accept a shell from another, ready to load it. Now, Edward pulled the trigger without hesitation. The bullet struck the shell in the soldier's hands with deadly precision. A thunderous explosion erupted from behind the reverse slope, followed by dismembered remains hurled into the air. In the Resistance's command tent, General Ball was raging at the communicator screen. Too slow, Major. Our Silver Wolf Regiment has already circled behind the enemy's War Bear Regiment and is engaging them. According to the original plan, you were supposed to hold the front and let Silver Wolf kick them in the rear. Now it's all reversed. General Ball, give us another half hour. Our regiment will definitely give the War Bear a good thrashing. The commander of the Raging Tiger Regiment saluted. Major, I'll give you only 20 minutes. The mobile forces from Aperta coming to rescue the War Bear could appear behind Silver Wolf at any moment. Do you know what that means? It means Silver Wolf will be annihilated and your Raging Tiger will face an entire reinforced regiment plus mobile reinforcements. It means the failure of this campaign. He cut the communication, grabbed a cigarette from the table, and lit it. Communications jammed, no frontline intel, no enemy intelligence. After 3 years of this kind of war, I still can't get used to it. Brenda's soft feminine voice always managed to soothe the general's temper. As long as that starship remains in synchronous orbit, our information and intelligence will always lag behind the enemy's. General Ball pointed upward. Yes. Ever since the manual was destroyed 3 years ago, we've been fighting blind. Brenda took the cigarette from his hand and stubbed it out in the ashtray. General Ball rose and walked to the battle map. If only that kid Edward could stir up a big commotion and scare the nobles in Aperta. Brenda also approached the map, leaned over, and placed her hands on the table, revealing the deep cleft of her cleavage. On his own, it'd be fine. But now that Alina is with him, it's uncertain. If my daughter can take care of herself. General Ball grunted, clasped his hands behind his back, stared at the map for a long moment, and let out a slow sigh. In the eastern fortlet, Edward was carefully examining the captured Imperial soldiers' communicators. His brow furrowed deeply as he discovered 2 records of communications with Aperta headquarters. Calculating the distance, reinforcements would arrive in at least 2 hours. He hadn't expected a simple guerrilla harassment mission to turn into this. He glanced back at Alina, who was busy at the control panel. A moment later, General Ball's face appeared on the communicator screen. Alina, where are you? How are you contacting headquarters directly? The general was already startled by the unexpected Imperial communication request. Seeing his daughter's face on the display filled him with both surprise and fear. We're in the eastern fortlet. I'm transmitting their battle map first. Alina pressed keys on the console. You scared me. I thought you'd been captured. Where's Edward? Edward? General Ball called out when he didn't see him. Edward rushed to the screen and recounted the battle to the general. I have 2 options. First, abandon the fortlet and head north to complete the guerrilla mission you assigned. Second, hold the fortlet, repel the approaching enemy reinforcements, and use the fortlet to completely sever the connection between Aperta and the spaceport. Edward continued, we have ample ammunition and the fortlet's position is favorable. But if you're worried about your daughter, choose the second option. After the Silver Wolf Regiment finishes their engagement, I'll have them dispatch mobile units to bypass Aperta and reinforce you. The general cut him off and began issuing orders to the Silver Wolf Regiment. Alphonse was packing his belongings, preparing to retreat to the starship at dawn the following day. He picked up a photo frame from the desk. Inside, Delina, with her black, curly hair, smiled back at him. He couldn't help but caress the photograph and murmured to himself, the war on Dataz is as good as lost. I will return to your side soon. A knock on the door pulled him from his reverie. He set the frame back down as Major Yang entered. The Warbear Regiment has encountered the resistance in Sector E11 of Cambird. The enemy has appeared behind their lines. Yang tossed the battle map to him. Alphonse stared at it, his gaze not lingering on Sector E11, but fixed on Sector E13, which was marked with a cluster of red dots. Yang watched Alphonse, knowing what he was thinking. The resistance in E13 has abandoned their camouflage. They're charging recklessly towards E11. In 30 minutes, that blade will be at the back of the Warbear Regiment. Why aren't we sending the Ace Mobile Unit as reinforcement? He was practically fuming. Our Ace Mobile Unit has the capability to launch a surprise attack on the rear of the E11 resistance within 20 minutes. Then, coordinating with the Warbear Regiment, we could crush the E11 forces in no time. After that, the unit could split to flank the incoming reinforcements on both sides, turning the tide of the battle. Alphonse rapped his knuckles on the map as he questioned, as if Yang were the foolish commander responsible for this. The small fort at the Chels Canyon has fallen. Our link to the starport is severed. The enemy numbers are unknown, and the Noble High Command has diverted the Ace unit to protect their own fragile supply lines. As Yang spoke, he pulled a suitcase from under the bed and began packing as well. Pigs. Just pigs wallowing in the mud of their own indulgence. Alphonse slammed the battle map onto the table in fury, the impact knocking Delina's photograph face down. We leave tonight. We'll go through the Chels Canyon. Yang looked at him in astonishment. Still through the canyon? Aren't you afraid the resistance will tear us apart? The resistance forces in the canyon won't be numerous. I estimate no more than 3 squads. Besides, isn't the Ace unit heading there? Alphonse said as he carefully placed Delina's photo into his bag. Honestly, I don't think the Ace unit is a Yang said, sweeping the items from the desk into his suitcase. It'll take them at least 2 hours to reach the canyon. The resistance could have a full nap by then. We'll head towards the canyon. If things look bad, we'll go around the western side of it. They'll help you pack. Go find us a hover truck that can fly high. Hearing Alphonse's words, Yang dropped what he was doing and rushed out. Under the moonlight on the sandy ground, Edward was laying mines according to the markers on his battle map. This battle plan was devised by Alina. He was not surprised by her exceptional tactical talent. Since childhood, Alina had been meticulous and possessed an unending curiosity for new things. He vividly remembered how Alina as a child had set traps to catch a sand fox just to figure out how it could find water in the desert. Soon 30 infantry mines were laid. He took the 2 large water tanks off his motorcycle and began sprinkling water around the minefield. Spread it all. Don't be stingy. If any sandworm crosses this minefield, the whole plan is ruined, Alina instructed. Yes, miss. Your performance today is truly impressive. I always thought you'd just stay in the lab playing with pheromone. Edward tossed the empty tank aside and headed back to the motorcycle for another. Don't call me miss. Anyone can call me that except you. Alina's voice carried a hint of playful anger. Given your fierce performance today, how about I call you Wildcat? Edward paused his work and glanced towards the small fort. Given your fierce performance today, they'll call you Big Wild Donkey from now on. Alina's laughter came through the communicator, causing a flutter in his heart. Edward discarded the empty tank, mounted his hoverbike, and sped off towards the western side of the canyon. Soon Edward chose a high dune and set up an ambush there. Suddenly he remembered the birth certificate his foster father had given him before he left. He lifted a corner of his camouflage cloak, letting the moonlight in. Name Edward Elric, father Lunder Elric, mother Rise Elric. Twin brother Alphonse Elric. Born in the year 3137 of the Empire's calendar at the 3rd City Hospital, Kenrad City Dosar. Born at the same time was his brother Alphonse Elric. Edward sighed, looking at the red infant footprint at the bottom of the document. I wonder how my brother is doing in Aperta City. If I were him, I'd run tonight, take the long way to the starport. Big Wild Donkey, what are you doing? Alina's voice rang out, snapping him from his thoughts. I'm thinking about my twin brother. He should be in Aperta City right now. Edward said, picking up his electromagnetic rifle to inspect it. You have a brother? Alina found this hard. While checking his ammunition, Edward told Alina everything, how he met his brother and about the documents General Barr. Holy! Alina cursed. What's with the cursing just because I have a brother? Edward asked, confused. No, look. Turn your scope to maximum magnification and look at sector F-17. Alina's voice had become panicked. Damn. Get ready. Get ready. Stick to the plan. He shoved the documents back into his pocket and braced his electromagnetic rifle. That's the last magazine of info rounds. You better not miss. Alina's voice was clearly tense. If you're nervous, go count the sand grains. Edward steadied his breathing, waiting for the enemy to enter his range. If this tactic doesn't work, him dead. This little fort is just a sitting duck. Alina's heavy breathing came through the communicator. Don't be afraid. If the tactic fails, it'll be right there. If you go to heaven, it'll follow you to heaven. If you go to hell, it'll chase you to hell. With that, Edward pulled the trigger. 60 rounds were fired in an instant. The Imperial soldiers spotted the direction of the attack and began returning fire. He slid down the reverse slope of the dune, tore off his camouflage cloak, and dashed towards another sand dune. At the same time, the ground shook violently. Several mounds of sand of varying sizes rapidly undulated across the ground, charging towards the marked Imperial troop transports. Moments later, the first sandworm burst from the earth, lunging at an Imperial transport and tearing it to shreds. All the transports screeched to a halt. Soldiers poured out, moving and firing at the sandworms erupting from the ground. Fire the cannons. Drive them into the minefield. Edward shouted as he ran. 2 consecutive blue streaks of light appeared in the sky, followed by the sound of explosions. The Imperial soldiers, powerless against the incoming energy blasts, could only move away from the sandworms. Why haven't your minds gone off? Alina shouted anxiously. What's the rush? They'll blow when they're all inside. Edward climbed up a sand dune and peered towards the minefield. The thunderous detonation of the landmines was devastating to the tightly packed Imperial soldiers. Those who had not yet stepped into the minefield dared not move, recklessly forced to engage in battle with the several colossal sandworms that came charging at them. The Imperial soldiers, frozen in place by fear, became easy targets for the energy cannon. Each shot from Alina claimed the lives of several of them. Reload. Alina shouted into the communicator. On it. Edward popped his head up from behind a dune and opened fire on the Imperial soldiers locked in combat with the sandworms. His marksmanship was impeccable, reaping the soldiers' lives like a scythe. Whoever fell into his crosshairs would meet their end in the next moment, whether they were moving or standing still. Even so, the sandworms were losing their battle against the Imperial soldiers. The largest of them let out a mournful shriek before collapsing slowly to the ground, kicking up a cloud of sand. Gradually, soldiers began firing towards Edward's position, bullets kicking up spurts of sand around him. Do you need that long to reload, Oi? A bullet grazed his helmet, the sheer impact knocking him to the sandy ground. Edward scrambled to his feet, moved a few steps along the dune, and popped up to return fire. An explosion erupted amidst the soldiers as Alina, having finished reloading, resumed her suppressive fire. Edward moved towards the dune where the ambush had begun, aiming to reach it before Alina emptied her next magazine. Climbing the dune and surveying the battlefield, he saw the remaining dozen or so Imperial soldiers holding their electromagnetic rifles aloft, nervously glancing around. Should we keep fighting? Alina asked. Cease fire. They're surrendering. Edward halted Alina's assault and stood up to face the Imperial soldiers. But the sandworms of Dasas had no intention of letting them go. A colossal worm erupted from beneath the feet of a few soldiers, swallowing them whole in a single gulp. The remaining soldiers fired back in desperation, but their sparse firepower was utterly useless against the behemoth. In no time, they were all devoured, wiped out by these leviathans. Alina, you two really have created some formidable weapons, Edward said, staring blankly at the crater the sandworms had churned into the dune. Alphonse paced anxiously back and forth in front of the officers' quarters. Hearing a horn, he looked towards the source and saw Yang sitting in a hovercar waving at him. He grabbed his luggage and hurried over. Can this thing handle the desert? Yang patted the car's exterior from the window and said, no problem. Get in, the ace unit left half an hour ago. He tossed his luggage into the back seat and jumped in, signaling Yang to go. Just now, rebel reinforcements arrived behind the War Bear regiment, catching them in a pincer and splitting them into 6 pockets. Yang maneuvered the controls, weaving through the streets of Apida City. You know, 3 years ago when the Imperial forces attacked Das's, we destroyed the rebel flagship manual in a lightning strike, and then swept through, capturing 7 of Das's starports and 80% of its major cities. Alphonse murmured as if in a dream. Why is it that in just 3 short years we can't even hold on to our few remaining city fortresses? Yang tried to console him. Don't lose heart. We've completed the observation mission the Empire assigned us. Victory or defeat isn't for us to decide. But I failed to accomplish what my mother asked of me, Alphonse said, pulling a sealed plastic bag from his chest. Inside was a document with a stark red infant footprint clearly visible. Your mother's request. What was it? Yang glanced at the document. 20 years ago, my pregnant mother came to my grandfather's house on Das's with her maid for a vacation. One day, she felt signs of premature labor. Accompanied by my grandfather, she was admitted to the hospital and gave birth to twin sons. Then war broke out. In the chaotic evacuation, the maid vanished, and with her went my poor twin brother. For the past 20 years, my mother has lived with guilt and worry. She hoped that this time I could search for my brother. Alphonse folded the document and tucked it back into his pocket. You have a twin brother? Yang exclaimed, piloting the skimmer out of the city's defense zone, speeding north along a road that intermittently appeared and disappeared in the desert. Yang continued, I think you should get some sleep to clear your head. He'll wake you if anything comes up, or if I get tired. His mind in turmoil, Alphonse found Yang's advice sensible. The drive to the starport would take 15 hours and piloting alone would be exhausting. Heeding Yang's suggestion, he closed his eyes and drifted off to sleep. After an unknown duration, Alphonse was roused by Yang's call. Alphonse, look over there. Alphonse rubbed his eyes and followed Yang's pointing finger. In that direction, several plumes of smoke rose high into the sky. What is that? He asked, fumbling for his binoculars. Through the lenses, the Imperial insignia on the wreckage was unmistakable. These Imperial troop transports were all mangled and billowing thick smoke. The ace unit is finished. Turn left. Detour to the west side of the rift. Alphonse grabbed his binoculars and turned towards the small eastern fortress marked on the map, zooming in to maximum magnification. He witnessed a sight that chilled him to the bone. The small caliber energy cannon on the fortress was turning, wobbling twice before aiming directly at them. They've spotted us. Get behind that dune, follow its contour. Alphonse said urgently to Yang. Why aren't they firing at us? Yang asked, puzzled. I don't know, just get us out of the cannon's line of fire first. Alphonse replied anxiously. The skimmer deftly sped along the reverse slope of the dune when a sharp ding pierced the air. A small hole was punched through the engine cover. With a grinding mechanical sound, the front of the skimmer lost its lift and plowed nose first into the sand. The immense inertia sent the skimmer tumbling across the desert. Yang's screams made Alphonse's head spin. As the rolling came to a halt, Yang's screams ceased, leaving him slumped motionless over the controls. Alphonse shook his dazed head, reached out, and checked Yang's breath. It was faint but steady. Thank goodness he's just unconscious. He didn't have time for a more thorough check on Yang. He began searching for the electromagnetic pistol he had stowed in his pistol in hand. He kicked open the door and staggered out of the vehicle. A wave of nausea forced him to his knees, where he dry heaved onto the sand. Just then a long shadow fell across the ground before him. He looked up to see a rebel soldier standing before him. The soldier, holding an electromagnetic rifle and wearing a full-face combat helmet with a long cape trailing behind, gestured with the weapon for him to drop his pistol. He dropped the gun. The rebel soldier lowered the rifle, then unclasped and removed his helmet, saying, Hello, Alphonse Elric. Edward lay prone on a sand dune, chewing on dried meat, as Alina's voice sang through the communicator. If you have the energy to sing, you might as well try to get some sleep. Who knows if they'll send more troops? He said between mouthfuls. How can I possibly sleep? When I saw that dark mass charging at us, I was certain we were done for. Now all I feel is the exhilarating rush of having survived against all odds. Alina replied, If you can't sleep, go count the sand grains. As Edward spoke, a tiny glint of light appeared in his scope. What is that? He steadied his electromagnetic rifle, aiming toward the direction and magnifying the scope for a closer look. Let me just blast him with a shot. Alina was utterly carried away by her excitement. Wait, don't fire. Edward stared at the image in his scope. The Imperial officer was peering through binoculars toward the direction of the small fort, his sharp features, clear chestnut hair, swaying in the wind. Watching the hovercraft speeding toward him, Edward exclaimed with elation, "That's my brother." "What?" Alina's shocked voice crackled through the communicator. "What do you plan to do?" "Kill him. Let him pass. I'm going to stop him and have a talk, of course." With that, Edward pulled the trigger, and the bullet struck the vehicle's engine with unerring accuracy. Watching the craft tumble and roll across the sand, sweat beaded on Edward's forehead. "You were going to kill him, weren't you?" Alina's voice carried a note of reproach. "I think your brother needs a doctor." Standing on the slope looking at his brother retching on the ground beside the crashed hovercraft a few meters away, Edward felt a mixture of elation and bitter sorrow surge within him. It was the thrill of finding kin intertwined with the anguish of fate's cruelty, the helplessness of being forced to stand in opposition to his own flesh and blood. He would not betray the resistance, just as he knew his brother would never betray the Stellar Empire. Seeing his brother discard his weapon, Edward decided to reveal himself. He took off his helmet and said, "Hello, Alphonse Elric." Alphonse's eyes widened, his face a mask of utter disbelief. "Hello, I am Alphonse. May I ask?" "Seeing this face, don't you know who I am?" Edward asked. "Yes, I can guess, but I still can't believe it. Or rather, I can't accept it." Edward pulled out a document and handed it over, asking, "How are your comrades?" "He should just be unconscious," Alphonse replied, taking the document. His entire body trembled as he gazed at the vivid red infant footprint. This damned fate. This damned fate. "It's all right, Alphonse. We're just on different sides." Edward sat down on the dune and patted the spot beside him, gesturing for his brother to sit. "It's not about the sides. I just feel disheartened that I couldn't fulfill Mother's last wish." Alphonse walked over and sat down beside him. "Besides the Empire's mission, my purpose here was to find you. Now that I've found you, I cannot bring you back to Mother." As Alphonse spoke, he pulled a document from his coat and handed it over along with his own. "Then take this back. He'll write a letter in a moment." Edward handed over his own birth certificate. Tucking Alphonse's copy into his pocket, he added, "He'll keep this one as a memento." Knowing his family had always been thinking of him filled him with a profound sense of fulfillment, yet he also felt a pang of regret for not being able to return with his brother. A steady sputtering sound drew near. Edward donned his helmet and stood up to see Alina approaching on a battered hoverbike, coming to a halt right in front of them. Alina removed her helmet, staring at the two identical faces before her, as if witnessing something miraculous. "Alina, this is my brother Alphonse. Alphonse, this is my, sister Alina." Edward introduced them to each other. Alina's eyebrow twitched slightly at the word sister. After exchanging greetings with Alphonse, she walked over to the hovercraft to check on Yang's condition. "Brother, she likes you. You must know that," Alphonse remarked. The two of them sat down on the ground once more. Edward said, "How could I not know? But look at us. We're in a life-and-death business, and there's no telling how long this war will last. It wouldn't be right to make such an irresponsible decision." Changing the subject, he asked, "Hey, do you have a girlfriend?" Alphonse pulled out his wallet and produced a photo. "Her name is Delina, the youngest daughter of Viscount LaRue. Here, keep this. It's a picture of our mother when she was young," Alphonse said, handing another photograph to Edward. "Wow, Auntie's long chestnut hair is so beautiful." Alina's exclamation came from behind. "When did you get?" Edward asked, turning to face Alina. "Just now. I wanted to ask what you plan to do with that officer. He's only unconscious, and I reckon he'll wake up soon. Should we?" Alina made a slashing gesture across her throat. Edward waved his hand dismissively. "Forget it. Give him a shot of sedative and let him sleep a while longer. Then get back to your fort quickly. Aperta's reinforcements could arrive any time." "What reinforcements?" "You just annihilated their elite mobile unit." Alphonse pointed at the smoldering wreck. "No wonder they were so well-equipped, even the sandworms couldn't handle them." Edward traced the scorch mark on his. "How did you manage it? It doesn't look like there's a large force stationed around here." Alphonse stood up and surveyed. "Just the two of us." Edward gestured toward Alina, who was administering the sedative to Yang, and recounted the battle to Alphonse. "Incredible. The use of pheromones and the tactical deployment were key. She's truly an outstanding frontline commander." Alphonse, who had always prided himself on his command abilities, found the battle a revelation. This was her first battle. She usually spends her time in the lab working on strange contraptions. Edward pulled a strip of dried meat from his pack, tore it open, and handed it over. The two brothers launched into a wide-ranging conversation, discussing everything from the 3-Year War to the Empire's decline from the Resistance on Data's to the Free Federation, from ground tactics to the deployment of warships in space. As Data's orange-eared sun peeked over the horizon, Edward handed the finished letter to Alphonse. "Alphonse, give my regards to Mother and Father." Edward clasped his brother's hand. "Take care, brother. After talking all night, I believe your strategic vision makes you perfectly suited to be a commander." Alphonse gazed at their slowly parting hands, reluctance evident in his eyes. "Go now while we still lack the ability to encircle the starport." Edward patted his brother's shoulder. Watching Alphonse climb into the patched-up Imperial troop carrier, he waved and shouted goodbye. Alphonse Elric. His brother thrust his hand out the window and called back, goodbye. Edward Elric. Will we ever meet again? Alina asked. We definitely will. Having such an outstanding brother is a true source of pride. Edward watched the vehicle grow smaller and smaller in the distance, his gaze lingering long after it had vanished. On a road that flickered in and out of existence across the desert, a battered Imperial troop transport came to a halt. Alphonse stepped out, throwing open the smoking hood desperately, trying to coax the vehicle's heart into beating for just a while longer. Ugh, my head is pounding, Alphonse. Have we been captured? Yang's voice drifted from the window. Yang, you've woken at just the right moment. Alphonse walked to the door and passed water through the window to Yang. Yang took the bottle and drank greedily. Were we ambushed? What time is it? Where are we? How did we escape? Yang rubbed his head, firing off questions like a rapid fire. We were ambushed. It's 11 a.m. Imperial Standard Time. We're 1050 kilometers south of Starport. We weren't captured, they gave us this vehicle and told us to leave on our own. Alphonse patiently answered Yang's rapid-fire questions. How are you feeling? Come down and help me figure out how to get this skimmer moving. We still have a 7-hour journey ahead. Alphonse opened the door, urging the newly conscious Yang to inspect the engine. Yang staggered over to the engine, peered inside, and began fiddling with something. It's in bad shape. Get me some insulating tape quick. If the plasma leaks out completely in this godforsaken place, we'll be walking 1,000 kilometers. After half an hour of tinkering, the two finally managed to reconnect the severed lines. Yang slammed the hood shut, looked up to say something, but the words caught in his throat at the sight before him. Alphonse, seeing the shock in Yang's eyes, clapped him on the shoulder. Half a vehicle is better than walking. The other half is in the belly of a sandworm. Yang circled the vehicle 3 times before climbing into the driver's seat. He turned to Alphonse. Did we run into the main resistance force? No, there were only 2 of them. Alphonse said with a yawn, exhausted from the all-night conversation and 5 hours of driving. You're full of... How is that possible? He quickly corrected himself, pressed the ignition, and started on their way. Alphonse recounted to Yang the battle tactics and process by which Edward had annihilated the elite unit. The loss of Datas wasn't a fluke at all. The frontline commanders were hopelessly outclassed, Yang said, shaking his head. They're about to besiege the Mamoon starport, our last one on Datas. Alphonse fought to stay awake. Why not just have the Masso in synchronous orbit bombard Datas into oblivion? Bombard it. What would the Empire want with a scorched planet? And firing the Masso's cannons would give the Free Federation the perfect pretext for war, wouldn't it? Think about the bigger picture, the entire war. Even if the Empire could defeat the Free Federation now, it wouldn't be an easy victory. But what happens after that? Can you guarantee another Federation won't just pop up? Alphonse was irritated by Yang's short-sightedness. He turned away, preparing to sleep. Edward lay prone on the sand under the blazing orange sun, sweat dripping steadily from his cheeks. He spoke into the communicator. A burst of static came through, followed by Alina's flustered voice. Where's... No enemy. Keep watch for me. I can't go on, I am dehydrating. Edward's voice was laced with exhaustion. Come to the bunker and rest. They'll keep watch. Alina's sweet, concerned voice flowed from the communicator. Soon after, Edward slipped into the bunker and drained the water Alina handed him in one go. Just then the communicator on the console buzzed, indicating an unknown signal source. Alina glanced at him. He tossed the empty bottle aside, gestured for her to answer it, and went to grab another one. Alina, where's Edward? General Barr's face appeared on the screen. Edward stopped mid-pour of water over his head and rushed to the screen, snapping a sharp salute. Edward, the Silver Wolf Company has taken Apita. The pressure on your end should be gone. Withdraw and return. I have a new mission for you. General Barr said. Apita fell. That fast. Edward found it hard to believe the Silver Wolf Company could have taken Apita so easily. They surrendered on their own. You two did an excellent job out there. But for now, get back here. There's an urgent mission. The communication cut off as soon as General Barr finished speaking. Old General Barr's talent for abruptly ending communications is truly unmatched. Still going strong at his age, he muttered, staring at the blank screen. A peal of Alina's silvery laughter echoed from behind him. At the command post, Edward could hear General Barr's booming laughter from the tent long before he arrived. Edward entered the tent, saluted, and announced, Special Operative A-19 reporting for duty. Alina followed him in and saluted as well. Your daughter reporting for duty. General Barr waved off his daughter's playful antics. Take a seat. No outsiders here. Brenda was the first to pull out a chair and sit beside General Barr. The Datas Free Government has decided to join the Free Federation. I'm sure this comes as no surprise to anyone. However, when we requested starship aid from the Free Federation, they agreed without hesitation. That was quite unexpected. Edward asked Brenda, what are their conditions? Brenda replied, their condition is that we send troops to the Isosu star system to help the resistance there achieve greater victories. General Barr interjected, this is their way of forcing us to pick a side immediately. But the offer of 1 interstellar battleship, 5 cruisers, and 3 destroyers is simply too tempting to refuse. Edward analyzed. If we just join without participating in combat, we'll have no standing in the interstellar community. Dotaz is too close to the frontier of the sector. But if we do join the fight, our own homeworld needs rebuilding. After 3 years of war's devastation, we desperately need to recover our economy. Neither joining nor abstaining seems like a good decision. Exactly. That's why we've reached an agreement with the Free Federation. We only need to send 100 elite personnel to the Isosu front lines to help train their troops, General Barr said, lighting a cigarette. It's not that simple, Edward said, rummaging through his gear. He found a star chart and spread it on the table. He pointed to a red line on it. Look here. This line is the Western Star Bridge. It connects our pal sector to the Empire's heartland. If the Free Federation wants to attack the Empire or vice versa, they must pass through this bridge. The space around it is riddled with complex spatial folds, making navigation impossible. Going around would mean traversing at least 4 star sectors. The time and fuel costs would be prohibitive for any fleet. General Barr narrowed his eyes. Are you saying the Federation is about to make its move? Edward shook his head and said, I don't think so. He marked a few points on the star chart and pointed at a red dot, saying this is the Anelli planet fortress guarding this end of the star bridge. The Isajuo star is only 0 for light hours away from it. The Free Federation intends to use Isajuo as a springboard to attack the Anelli planet fortress. The reason he gifted us a fleet is to secure the border of the Percy star sector when the Federation makes its move. So do you think our star sector will face an invasion from neighboring states? Brenda asked, resting her chin on her hand with keen interest. 80% chance they are after all pro-Empire, Edward said. I didn't know you had the potential for Space Warfare Command. How about you take charge of the fleet when it arrives? General Barr chuckled and stubbed out his cigarette. He waved his hand and said, I can't. This requires a professional. Barr gave a bitter smile. Professional? 3 years ago we had just gained independence, and the Empire launched an undeclared war on us. After the manor was destroyed, we lost all our professionals in this field. First, let's establish the Starfleet. Have the Federation send people to train us, Brenda said, grasping General Barr's hand on the table to soothe his frustration and agitation. Then I won't have you lead the team to Isajuo Star. Stay here and wait for the warships. The fleet will arrive in 3 days, General Barr said. Edward was taken aback and quickly asked, are you really going to make me the fleet commander? General Barr gave him a sidelong glance and said, do I have a choice? Among the lame, we pick the general. Arriving in 3 days then. Edward said, pointing upward. The Empire's Masuwa has already withdrawn. General Barr took out another cigarette, but didn't light it, lost in thought. On the Masuwa, Alphonse was giving a work report. He closed the file and saluted, saying, that concludes the entire process of this campaign and some of my personal observations. General Ulrich motioned for him to sit down and address the attendees. Lieutenant Colonel, this report is detailed and the opinions are sound. I think we should send it directly to Imperial headquarters. Dismissed. Lieutenant Colonel Alphonse, stay behind. Alphonse stood up and waited for the other colleagues to file out of the meeting room before sitting back down. Lieutenant Colonel Alphonse, regarding the defeat on Dusisai Star, I want to hear your true opinion, not these pompous platitudes, Ulrich said, staring at him with wolf-like eyes. General, there are 3 main reasons for our defeat. First, equipment. Second, personnel quality. Third, combat, well, Alphonse said. Explain, Ulrich said with interest. First, in terms of equipment, our adaptability was too low. It was not suited for Duasasis, sandy, and hilly terrain. Moreover, we have made no progress in developing adaptable equipment. At least 4 types of information grenades appeared on the battlefield used by the enemy to lure beasts into attacking us. Also, nearly every soldier had a camouflage cloak. We didn't even detect the movement of battalion-sized forces. Indeed, that's true. Those thunderhorn beasts and sandworms caused a significant portion of our casualties. Then there's the gap in personnel quality. The disparity between frontline commanders and fighters was immense. I once witnessed an Imperial Ace company being wiped out by 2 resistance fighters. Oh. Tell me more. Ulrich gestured for him to come closer. Alphonse sat beside the general and opened the operational map to begin his account. This person's courage was truly remarkable. As the saying goes, a hero is born young, Ulrich said, motioning for him to continue. Finally, in terms of combat, well, when faced with major decisions, they tended to be conservative or prioritize preserving escape routes, which caused us to miss many opportunities for counterattacks, Alphonse said. Indeed, Apida surrendered without any resistance after his retreat was cut off. It's infuriating, the general. Alphonse was startled by the general's words. Apida surrendered. He asked. Yes, lucky you got out fast, or you'd be a prisoner, the general said, pointing at him with a smile. Alphonse flushed crimson at the remark. You don't need to feel ashamed. I won't report this conversation since some higher-ups can't stand the truth, the general said, his expression turning serious. The Empire is in desperate need of fresh blood. Saplings like you must be protected. General, will we be withdrawing to the Anelli planet fortress? Alphonse looked up and asked. Yes. The situation at Asajio is critical. The higher-ups want to pull this blade back to guard the throat, the general said, his expression growing even darker. He continued, Alphonse, have you ever seen someone fight while using a blade to protect their own throat? Shouldn't a blade be thrust into the enemy's vital points and twisted wildly? The old men in the fortress have lost their original bloodlust. Alphonse remained silent at a loss for words. He hadn't expected this corruption to have permeated so deeply into the empire. After leaving the meeting room, he returned to his cabin. Standing before the porthole, he watched the shrinking Duosei star, recalling the long conversation with his brother that night. He murmured to himself, withdraw to the Anelli planet fortress. Edward, you predicted it all. Having such an outstanding brother is truly something to be proud of. On the third day after the full liberation of Duosei star, Edward stood on the starport, trembling with rage, as he looked at the Luxir, a star warship riddled with gaping holes. The once smooth hull was dotted with craters, several main cannons bore obvious scorch marks, and in some original gun emplacements there was no trace of the main cannons, only bottomless pits. Even the bridge was heavily damaged. Edward couldn't fathom how this star warship had managed to reach the Duosei starport. Lieutenant Colonel Edward, the Luxir's propulsion system is intact, the weapons system is 90 destroyed, the shield system is obliterated, and there is a severe shortage of onboard shuttles. The Federation Major read from the damage report. Edward waved his hand to stop the Major from continuing. His brows knitted together. How long to repair it? He asked. The Federation Major wiped his brow. More than 3 months. Edward shook his head. What if we only repair the weapons system? The Major replied, about a month. Edward stepped closer, almost pressing his face against the Major's. What if I only repair the main cannons? The Major stepped back half a pace. 10 days or so. Edward pressed forward again. What about my cruisers and destroyers? They'll arrive tomorrow, the Major said, having nowhere left to retreat. What's their condition? Edward's patience was wearing thin. No problems aside from being a bit old in service, the Major said, wiping his face. Whether sweat or spit it, the great counteroffensive on Asajio star is about to begin. Once the Federation commits its forces, will face pressure from neighboring states. And you expect me to defend the rich planets of this star sector with this? Edward finally lost his temper and exploded. Edward had gone a full day without sleep, and now he bitterly regretted not taking up the assignment to train new recruits on Isoda star. Don't talk to me about difficulties. I don't want to hear it. Our top priority right now is to restore the Lusher to combat readiness before the Isoda full-scale counteroffensive begins. Without a star battleship, are you going to use those patrol cruisers and destroyers older than General Barr himself to protect the few resource-rich mining planets in our star system? Edward angrily cut off the logistics chief's transmission and paced before the star map. Your habit of hanging up on people is becoming more and more like Dad's, Alina said with a smile. What a headache. I've picked up a hot potato, and now nobody would even take it off my hands. I've walked right into Dad's trap. He's probably stretched out on a Vexy beach right now, soaking up the sun with Branda. Edward muttered as he paced. Just then the communicator buzzed. Alina pressed the button, and General Barr's torso appeared on the screen, wearing a beach shirt. Oh, Edward guessed it right. Alina clapped her hands. Guess what? General Barr asked, puzzled. Edward said you were lying on a Vexy beach, enjoying the sun with Branda. Alina chuckled behind her hand. Wrong guess. I'm over here in Panglan. Where's Edward? Edward, General Barr bellowed. General. Edward saluted. General Barr waved his hand dismissively. You've been in office barely any time, boy, and you've already managed to offend the energy, logistics, and personnel departments all at once. Tell me, how am I supposed to back you up? I must get the fleet underway before the Isoda counteroffensive begins to intercept any enemy fleet that might strike at the edge of our star domain. Edward lowered his hand. Edward, have you considered that even if we send out the fleet, we might not be able to hold the line? General Barr, stellar warfare is different from ground warfare. Once they occupy those mining planets and establish defensive bases, it will be extremely difficult to drive their fleet out. Unless you have another plan. Edward couldn't understand why the old general, always so eager for battle, would ask such a question. I have no other plan. I just don't want to lead our fleet out to be slaughtered for nothing, the general said with a shake of his head. Edward understood then. The general was falling into the same mistake that every aging ruler makes. Now that the battlefield had shifted from the familiar ground to the vastness of space, the general had lost the god of war aura he once commanded on land, degenerating into a frail old man, hesitant and full of doubt. Dad, you're old. Edward decided to be blunt. You brat, I'm not so old that I can't teach you a lesson yet. The general froze, not expecting Edward to call it out so directly. Just as Edward was about to launch into his prepared arguments, a fair-skinned hand appeared on the screen and pressed the disconnect button. Sigh, Edward, what are we going to do? Alina said, dejected. Yeah. If we lose those 3 mining planets, what will our future hold? Edward shook his head helplessly. On Pinglan's white sandy beach, the scenery was beautiful. General Barr sat in his beach chair, staring at the communicator Branda had cut off. That boy is about to start lecturing me. General Barr tossed the communicator aside. I think you should at least hear his plan. After all, he is the newly appointed Commander-in-Chief of the Space Force, Branda said, placing her hand on the general's shoulder. Besides, can we really afford to lose the resources from those 3 mining planets? So we're just going to send our freshly acquired fleet out to die? If we lose the mining planets, we can fall back on our agricultural worlds. Without a fleet, how do we defend DOSes? Do we have to relive what happened 3 years ago just to keep our economy afloat? Barr remained stubborn. Branda pressed harder on his shoulder, making him wince in pain. I don't want you to become a tyrant, and I certainly don't want you to become a fool of a ruler. I don't know if you still remember the oath you swore when we founded the resistance 20 years ago, but I remember mine vividly. Branda lowered her head, squinting at General Barr, and continued. I think it's necessary to repeat my oath. If you ever fall into corruption, I will kill you. The general raised his hands in surrender. All right, I've got it. I won't let my guard down, okay? 20 years, and your temper hasn't changed one bit. With that, he picked up the communicator and connected to Edward. All right, I want to hear your plan, General Barr said. Without a cool sea breeze swept across the beach. On the warm sand, the planet's highest leader sat frozen before the communicator, unable to speak for a long time. Hey, you can't be serious. General Barr sat up straight in his beach chair. If we lose those mining planets, we don't just lose our economic lifeline. We lose our standing in the interstellar community. From that moment on, we'll become nothing more than a Federation vassal stripped of any real say. Edward continued. If we win, we'll have a strong economy. With that economy, we can build a fleet that truly belongs to us and earn a higher interstellar status and greater influence within the Federation. And once the frontier of our star domain is breached, the Federation will inevitably use the pretext of joint defense to station their fleet in our star system permanently. What sovereignty will we have left then? Branda placed her hand back on the general's shoulder, her gentle voice flowing through that soft touch. But this battle plan is far too risky. The general shook his head. But it's worth a try, Branda said. Fine. He'll have all departments cooperate with you fully. Within 10 days, get the Lusher up to your minimum combat standard, the general said, then cut the transmission. He turned to Branda and said, I suppose I really am getting old. In the starport, countless transport shuttles darted back and forth. The Lusher's massive hull, several kilometers long, was held in place by force fields within its berth. Mechanical arms and pipelines covered her like tentacles, arcs of electricity, flickering across every surface. Countless workers floated around her. The massive barrel of the Nova-class main cannon was being remounted into its turret. She was undergoing a rebirth. In the adjacent berths, the fleet's aging patrol cruisers and destroyers were also undergoing comprehensive overhaul. Both classes were indispensable to the fleet. Patrol cruisers boasted extremely high sublight speeds and a stellar-class main cannon. While their shields weren't as thick as a star battleship's, they could still withstand direct hits from anything below a planetary-class battery. Equipped with shuttle bays and other amenities, they were true sector dominators. Destroyers excelled in maneuverability. Though armed with only a planetary-class main gun, they had a rapid rate of fire and quick turret traverse, earning them the nickname Shuttle Killers. Atop the Star Tower, Edward watched the bustling starport below and handed the folder back to Alina. If we can't repair both the main cannon and the shield systems, concentrate our resources on fixing the main cannon. Edward said. Understood. He'll relay the order immediately, Alina said, jotting down notes on the file. Also, you're not allowed to participate in this battle. Edward patted Alina on the shoulder and turned to leave. If you go to heaven, it'll follow you to heaven. If you go to hell, it'll chase you into hell, Alina said firmly behind him. Edward gazed at Alina, feeling the fiery determination in her eyes, and sighed. This time our good neighbors, the Goran Star Dominion, will surely take advantage of the Federation's fleet redeployment to encroach upon our territory. Our combat strength ratio against the enemy is 1-3. And with the Lusher in its current state, you should just stay put in. Has. That's precisely why I must go with you. Alina defiantly met his gaze, forcing him to look away. Edward sighed again. If we both go and something happens, who will be there for the old man? He has Aunt Brenda by his side. I want to be by yours. She walked over and wrapped her arms around him. All right. Edward returned the embrace, pulling her close. Far away on the Goran Star Dominion's frontier, Sergei Roman Khan stood on the bridge of the Tidar, watching with satisfaction as his officers bustled at their stations. Raphael, how many star hours until we reach the Pars sector? Sergei asked, removing his pristine white gloves and placing them on the command console. Commander, we are 2 star hours away. Raphael manipulated the console, bringing up the flight path. Good. When can we initiate the jump? Sergei queried. We are sufficiently distant from the nearest star. We can jump at any time, Commander. Raphael replied respectfully. Sergei made a chopping motion with his hand. Then let's get moving. However, Commander, you haven't yet issued the operational orders. What is the objective of this mission? Raphael asked, saluting. Sergei declared, target the Datas system in the Pars sector. Objectives: 1. Destroy the Datas planetary fleet. 2. Seize the mineral-rich planets within the system. But sir, our Dominion has always maintained friendly relations with the Pars sector, and our trade is frequent. A sudden attack like this might provoke the Free Federation to send a fleet in support. Raphael said, his face etched with concern. Don't worry about those arrogant barbarians of the Free Federation. I have reliable intelligence from the Empire. The .has system is guarded by only one battle-scarred interstellar warship and 5 outdated vessels. Sergei's tone was laced with impatience. Raphael was puzzled. But sir, we haven't been particularly obedient to the Empire's commands in recent years. Why this sudden? Before he could finish, Sergei slammed his hand on the table, furious. Raphael, what do you know? The Free Federation is likely on its last legs this time. If we don't seize those mineral planets, are we just going to wait for the Empire's warships to swoop in and take them? Transmit the battle orders to all departments. Commence the operation. Execute your orders. Yes, sir. Raphael saluted, turned, and departed. Inside the conference room at Sal's starport, Edward was listening to a briefing. We estimate that before departure we can repair 13 of the 16 Nova-class main cannons. The energy shield system should be restored to about 25% functionality. We've replenished 300 strike fighters. We've had to forego the stellar-class and planetary-class secondary cannons, which leaves the Lusher with some blind spots in its firing arcs. I've marked the approximate locations of these blind spots on the map for your review, Commander. The logistics officer handed the document over with both hands. Edward took the document and examined it carefully. What about the crew? Crew has been replenished and given emergency training by Federation specialists. The logistics officer reported. Edward turned to Alina. How much of an edge will our modifications give the cruisers and destroyers? Alina's face lit up with excitement. Much more firepower. We've increased the number of stellar-class main cannons on the cruisers and even fitted a few onto the destroyers. We've also optimized their fusion reactors, giving them more energy and greater speed. We've increased the number of maneuvering thrusters, making them far more agile, capable of maneuvers they couldn't have performed before. Edward gave her a look. Get serious. Tell me the drawbacks. Automation is lacking. They require larger crews, which puts a strain on the life support systems. Alina said, her expression turning solemn. Well, we're fighting in our own backyard, so that's a non-issue. Edward, he tapped the document with the back of his hand, addressing the logistics officer. Logistics officer, I have a task for you. You must see it done. The officer saluted. At your command, Commander. When we depart, make absolutely sure those Federation training officers are on board. If you have to tie them up to accomplish it, so be it. And keep them busy, training our crew throughout the voyage. With that, he stood up, signaling the end of the meeting. After everyone had filed out of the room, Alina called out to Edward, who, I've got something neat to show you. She handed him a document. A field neutralizer. Edward read, looking down at the file. Alina pointed to the data on the page. This device can neutralize a ship's unilateral energy field, completely crippling the enemy's shield system. We'll need to run tests once we have a working prototype to see its full effect. Edward's excitement grew with every line he read. He grabbed Alina's hand enthusiastically. You're my lucky charm. Then give me a kiss. Alina leaned her face in close. What? He was still lost in his excitement. A reward. Alina repeated, her cheeks flushing. He swept her into his arms, and they kissed deeply. After a moment of shared passion, he murmured to her, let's get married when we get back. Yes. Alina buried her face in his chest. Just then the communicator buzzed. Edward activated it, and General Barr's face appeared on the screen. Edward, the Free Federation fleet has suffered a heavy blow in the Isoda system. I want to hear your thoughts. General Barr said. As long as they can secure the planet Isoda, it's enough if a third of the Federation fleet survives. I don't understand. General Barr said, puzzled. The Federation wants Isoda so badly because its location allows it to counter the Andre planetary fortress. Isoda will be turned into a star fortress. For the Federation to have a secure environment to develop, they must seal off the West Star Bridge. It's their lifeline, and it's the only way we can secure our own position. He analyzed it for the general. But why doesn't the Federation just attack the Andre planetary fortress directly? General Barr asked. Because they can't win. A planetary fortress is far more terrifying than a warship. Its terror lies not just in its offense, but in its defense and logistics. As long as it holds its position, an endless stream of Imperial warships will pour out from the Star Bridge behind it. All right, proceed with the original plan, General Barr said. Father, Alina will be coming with me this time. He hesitated, but decided to say it anyway. General Barr seemed to tremble slightly, and after a long pause he finally said, all right, take good care of my Alina. Edward pulled Alina in front of the screen. Father, we're getting married when we return. I heard you, you rascal. General Barr ended the communication. At Edward's command, the fleet slowly departed from the starport. He issued the combat orders to every ship and station, instantly stirring a wave of astonishment throughout the crew. Every officer and soldier in the fleet was infected by the commander's unshakable confidence in victory. Even the Federation instructors forced to serve aboard the ships were won over by Edward's resolute determination. They eagerly shared their most treasured combat experiences, and some even volunteered to join the battle missions on their own initiative. In no time, morale soared across every rank of the fleet. Keyshawn was a radar analysis specialist aboard the Lushel stationed high in the ship's bridge. He had joined the Lushel's combat crew and undergone rigorous selection specifically to follow his idol, the tactical master Edward. Today, watching his hero issue battle directives one by one from the bridge, he trembled with sheer excitement. Keyshawn, I think this battle will go down in history, Sabo whispered beside him. Keyshawn curled his lip in disdain. Nonsense. Which of Lord Edward's battles hasn't gone down in history? He's the sand demon of Das's. Back then, our Silver Wolf Company was ordered to reinforce Edward at Chelsea Canyon. But by the time we arrived, guess what we saw? What did you see? Sabo leaned in curiously. We spotted the towering column of smoke from 10 kilometers out. We thought a bloody battle was still raging, but when we got there we found over 300 Imperial soldiers' corpses and wreckage of troop carriers scattered everywhere. Lord Edward was crouched on a dune wiping his dagger. That terrifying aura truly lived up to the name Sand Demon. Keyshawn spoke with fervor as if the glorious feat were his own. Wow, he took out over 300 all by himself. Sabo's jaw dropped. Keyshawn said smugly, I heard he did it alongside General Barr's daughter. Just then Sabo stood and saluted, and Keyshawn scrambled to his feet to salute as well. No need for formalities. From now on, no one needs to salute on the bridge. Just focus on your duties. Edward turned to Keyshawn and the others, adding, in this operation you are the key to victory. Success hinges on your ability to spot the enemy fleet before they spot us. Give it everything you have. Keyshawn clasped Edward's outstretched hand, feeling strength surge through him. I guarantee the mission will be accomplished. Aboard the Auriga-class cruiser, Captain Martin was holding a combat briefing on the bridge. Lord Edward is placing life and death in our hands, Chief of Staff Liv said. Captain Martin replied, yes. He said it himself. Even if the Lushel is destroyed, it doesn't matter as long as we annihilate the enemy forces, that's victory. Liv said, if we can complete our combat mission within the scheduled time, we'll still have time to support the Lushel. We must find a way to finish our combat directives quickly and then rush to their aid. Das's star can lose the Lushel, but it cannot lose Lord Edward. He is an exceptional commander, and this is a battle we cannot afford to lose. Captain Martin said, then strode toward his quarters. In the laboratory aboard the Lushel, Alina was irritably trying to push Edward out of the room. Don't disturb me while I'm working, she said. I just wanted to see if there's anything I can help with, Edward replied, bracing both hands on the doorframe, refusing to leave. Don't you have a massive interstellar warship to manage? Alina turned back to her workstation, attempting to There's nothing for me to do. I'm bored out of my mind, Edward said, kneading his captain's cap in his hands. If you're nervous, go count some sand, Alina replied without turning around. Sigh. Edward let out a long sigh, stepped out of the lab, and headed down the corridor toward the shuttle hangar. Arriving at the hangar, he saw a Federation instructor teaching tactical flight maneuvers to the pilots. He leaned against the hatch, watching the focused pilots with keen interest. The key to this tactical coordination is that after your wingman performs a horizontal roll, he'll immediately execute a sharp turn. You must instantly attack the enemy craft on his tail. The opportunity is fleeting. The instructor was explaining on the display board when he suddenly noticed Edward at the hatch. He ordered the pilots to discuss freely among themselves. Captain, he saluted. At ease, Edward waved his hand. Feeling he had interrupted the instructor's lesson, he turned to leave. The shuttle instructor stepped forward, blocking Edward's path. I am deeply awed by your fearless spirit, sir. Please grant me a shuttle. Let me join the shuttle attack group. Edward was taken aback, clearly unprepared for such a request. No, the Lushel won't be destroyed that easily. You're an invaluable asset. We'll need your expertise for fleet training in the future. The instructor refused to be discouraged. Sir, I am a warrior of the Free Federation. I was wounded on the front lines and came to the Lushel as an instructor. You've devised an allure-nothing battle plan to defend the Federation's frontier. Please let me do my part. But we don't have any spare shuttles, Edward said, scratching his head. With battle looming, he didn't want to dampen anyone's fighting spirit. The shuttle instructor waved his hand dismissively. That's a minor issue. As long as you approve, sir, I'll make the arrangement. With that, he dashed back to the pilot formation, grabbed one of them, and dragged him over to Edward. His name is Milk. His eyesight isn't great, but he has excellent timing for shooting. Please assign him to a secondary cannon position. The shuttle instructor introduced the young man he had hauled over. Edward couldn't help but feel embarrassed. He had been wondering what the instructor's solution would be. Turns out he simply kicked a pilot out of the lineup to make room for himself. All right, Milk, come with me. Edward led Milk out of the hangar. Milk hurried to keep pace and asked, Sir, may I ask? I'm Edward Elric, Edward said. Milk hadn't expected it to be the captain himself. Excitedly, he said, Captain, please assign me to the main cannon position. At that moment, the ship-wide alarm blared. Before Edward could even answer, his communicator projected a screen on its own. Captain, enemy fleet detected at coordinates 151, 69, 81. Please report to the bridge immediately. Edward ended the call and said to Milk, follow me for now. Then he sprinted toward the bridge. Moments later, his wrist communicator buzzed again. He pressed the answer button and Alina's anxious face appeared on the screen. Edward, the field neutralizer is ready. There's no time to test it. Send someone to help me transport it to the main camp. Also, its range is limited, so keep that in mind when you use it. Milk, go to the lab and find Alina. Follow her orders, Edward said as he ran. Yes, sir. Milk acknowledged and sprinted off in another direction. Shortly after Edward arrived at the bridge where the crew was gathered around Kosan, Edward approached and asked, what's the situation? What's the distance? Kosan stood and saluted. Captain, I was just using the gravitational shear measurement method to map the battle zone we're approaching. We detected several high-speed objects. The ship's analysis division concludes they are enemy vessels approximately 0.2 light hours away. Edward was surprised they detected the enemy fleet so early. He asked, have they spotted us? Probably not, they haven't accelerated. However, according to the law of detectability, reversibility being found is inevitable. Kosan replied. Edward stood before the command console, overlooking the surrounding star field. He slowly nodded and asked, is there a way to let them know we've detected them? Kosan was taken aback by the captain's question. That's simple. We just send a detection beam towards them. But that would expose our position. Edward thought for a moment, then asked, how many ships do they have? Well, based on the gravitational detection report, we can only identify a few of their larger targets. Kosan answered. With no more questions, Edward calmly gave the order, communications officer, connect me to all ship command systems. Prepare for battle. Moments later, the faces of several captains appeared on the screen. Edward looked at the cold stars drifting nearby on the star map. They were frigid rogue planets, also known as orphan planets. Over eons, the central star's gravity could no longer counteract the centrifugal force of their orbits, casting them out of their systems to wander here. He steadied himself and commanded, all cruisers take position behind the cold stars in Sector A marked on the map. All destroyers take position behind the rubble pile in Sector B. Once in position, hold absolutely still. Let these celestial bodies mask you from enemy detection. Move quickly. If anyone gets spotted during the maneuver, retreat towards my position. When the Lusher arrives at Sector C, they'll have her emit a detection beam to lure the enemy towards you. Focus your fire on their vulnerable cruisers and destroyers. The enemy flagship will be handled by the Lusher. You must eliminate their cruisers and destroyers within 30 minutes, then turn around to support us. All ships move. Meanwhile, on the bridge of the Tidar, the officers glared at their commander with disgust, a sentiment completely lost on Serge. He lounged in his command chair, eyeing Raphael with amusement. Raphael, we've penetrated 0.5 light hours into the Parthian star domain, and there's not a trace of those DOS agents. Your assessment of the entire battlefield situation has been severe. Raphael, growing uneasy, believed the Parthian domain couldn't be completely undefended. Please, sir, issue orders to prepare for battle. It's impossible for them to have no defenses at all. Serge snorted. Still don't get it. DOSes has been abandoned by the Free Federation. Think about it. DOSes needs a fleet to defend its borders, and the Free Federation sends them a pile of scrap. But DOSes could have easily requested the Free Federation to assist in its defense. Raphael argued. Serge laughed heartily. The Free Federation's fleet was crippled in the Exodar system. They're too busy licking their wounds to bother with DOSes. Raphael started to retort, but was cut off by a piercing alarm. Report, Commander Serge. We've just been swept by a detection beam. We immediately conducted counter-reconnaissance and located one enemy starship. Excellent. We were just talking about scrap and a piece of it floats right to us. My orders are full speed ahead. Destroy that enemy starship. Serge commanded. General, shouldn't we send a destroyer to scout it out first? Raphael tried to curb Serge's impulsive command. Raphael, do your job. If they get away, can you bear the responsibility? Serge slammed his fist on the Sir, the target has disappeared. What? Where did it go? Find it. Serge growled in frustration. All ships full pursuit. On the bridge of the Lusher, everyone was executing the battle plan with tense efficiency. The neutralizer is installed. Alina's breathless voice came through the communicator. Good. Find a place to hide, Edward said. Say that again, and he'll kick your ass. I'm staying at the 15th main cannon to ensure the neutralizer works properly. Alina's voice echoed across the bridge, drawing a few stifled chuckles from the crew. Edward coughed awkwardly and began issuing orders. Launch all shuttles and have them wait behind the nearby rocks. Once their shield system is down, all shuttles are to attack the enemy ship, prioritizing the hangar bay exits and secondary cannons. We'll reveal ourselves, then immediately fall back behind the cold star at coordinates 147, 68, 78. All main cannons are to open fire once the enemy's shield system is down, targeting their primary weapons first. Having distributed his orders, Edward watched the bustling crew and found himself with nothing to do. He thought about asking for a cup of tea, but dismissed the idea. Just then a cup of tea was placed on the console before him. Sir, I'm Winchell, an operations instructor for the Free Federation. Allow me to temporarily serve as your orderly. Edward turned to look at the dark-skinned man and nodded in thanks. I thought I had ordered all non-combat personnel to stand by near the escape pods. Winchell smiled slightly. Who could possibly turn down a front row seat for such a grand spectacle? Edward also smiled. Does the Free Federation care about a small border skirmish like this, eh? Sir, we are in position. Edward stood up and declared, commence the operation. Detection complete. The enemy fleet consists of 1 starship, 8 cruisers, and 14 destroyers. We are now exposed. Our ship has completed its maneuver. The enemy fleet is accelerating towards our last known position. Target lost. Outside the viewport, the massive form of the cold star slowly drifted past. Edward took a sip of tea, silently listening to the battle reports. Our cruisers have made contact with the enemy. Edward set down his teacup. We're going out. Let their flagship fire a few salvos at us, make a token gesture, then fall back. The Lusher surged forward, emerging from the cold star's shadow, and immediately fired a broadside from its main cannons at the enemy flagship. The energy blasts rippled across the enemy's shield. Moments later, the enemy flagship's return fire struck the Lusher with pinpoint accuracy. The Lusher's fragile shields flickered and dimmed noticeably. The ship hastily retreated behind the cold star, barely escaping the enemy flagship's firing arc. Distracted by the Lusher, the enemy flagship had surged forward, causing a momentary disconnect in their fleet. With a command from Captain Martin, the cruisers and destroyers hidden behind the cold stars and rocks burst forth, unleashing a furious barrage upon the enemy's trailing ships. Several enemy cruisers and destroyers struck at point-blank range by Stellar-class. Main cannons were instantly riddled with holes and rendered combat ineffective. The following enemy ships, disregarding their flagship's advance, scrambled to respond. Lacking unified command, their actions were utterly uncoordinated. In contrast, Martin's side, with sharp leadership, seized the fleeting opportunity. He ordered all ships to focus fire on the most threatening enemy cruisers. With synchronized volleys, they quickly reduced several more enemy vessels to wreckage. The enemy ships eventually regained their composure and turned to attack Martin's group near the cold star. However, the destroyers behind them, equipped with Stellar-class main cannons, were not about to let them succeed easily. They followed, keeping up a relentless fire. The two fleets became locked in a chaotic melee, but under Martin's capable command, the tide of battle began to turn decisively in their favor. On the arched bridge of the Tidar, Cirque paced furiously, shaking his fist. Raphael, not another. You've seen the gaping hole in the Lushel. A wreck like that, barely patched up, is no threat to us. Undermine morale again, and I'll have you court-martialed. Raphael fell silent and retreated to the side, a maelstrom of emotions churning within him. Offering a dissenting opinion was, after all, the very essence of a staff officer's duty. Yet his obstinate superior, blinded by the lust for quick victory, refused to heed a single word he said. He could only pray that their side would win this minor space skirmish, thereby sparing him from his superior's wrath. For victors are generous. But should they lose this battle, even if they managed to retreat to the homeworld, he knew all the blame would be heaped upon his own head. Report. 3 enemy cruisers and 5 destroyers detected. Our cruiser, the Viking, has been destroyed. The destroyers Dalver and Whale are lost. The sudden report jolted Cirque to his feet. Where did they come from? They must have been hidden behind the nearby cold star and floating rocks, launching a crossfire ambush. Cirque commanded, order the cruisers and destroyers to engage targets at will. We've lost 3 more cruisers and 5 destroyers. Damn it. What kind of firepower is that? They've got planetary-class main cannons on their destroyers. Decelerate. Bring the Tidar into the fight. Turn us around now. If we keep going forward, our firing arc will be blocked by that blasted cold star. As he spoke, Cirque angrily tore off his cap and hurled it onto the command console. Suddenly a klaxon blared, followed by a shudder that rippled through the Tidar's shield like waves on water. We're under fire from a Nova-class main cannon salvo. It's the enemy flagship. Pursue. Destroy the Lushel. The remaining cruisers and destroyers can't touch our shields. Tear the Lushel apart first. Cirque picked up his cap and put it back on. The bridge officers exchanged uneasy glances at the contradictory orders. One of them ventured, "But sir, our cruisers and destroyers will be." Silence. Execute my orders. Launch the shuttles to support them. Cirque's face was a mask of fury. He could not stomach the provocation from a battered warship, nor accept the grievous losses inflicted upon his escort vessels. The Tidar surged forward, sliding towards the cold star where the Lushel had retreated. As they neared the edge of its gravitational pull, the Lushel's mangled prow slowly emerged from behind the star. A pale violet beam lanced out and struck the Tidar's hull. But this time, there was no tremor, no ripple across the shield. Fire! Cirque roared, slamming his fist onto the console. The response was not the thunderous roar of a Nova-class salvo, but the shrill shriek of an alarm. Report. Our shields are down. Impossible. Cirque's voice was a panicked screech. Before his words faded, the Lushel charged out from behind the cold star. Its Nova-class main cannon glowed, and Cirque clearly saw the brilliant flash of its discharge. "Fire!" he screamed. "Fire everything!" Boom! A shell blasted a hole clean through the bridge of the Tidar. The violent decompression instantly sucked several officers out into the void. Their uniforms, sensing the pressure change, instantly transformed into fully enclosed lightweight spacesuits. Automated repair drones flew to the breach, spraying nanites to seal the hole. Staring at the damage report on the screen, a realization dawned on Cirque. "Ram them," he shouted. "They have no secondary cannons, no shuttles." Aboard the Lushel, every crew member stared at their screens. The long list of confirmed kills reignited their fighting spirit. They had all believed this was a one-way trip prepared to meet their end. But under Edward's leadership, they had not only seen the dawn of victory, but also the hope of survival. Edward pressed the all-ship comms button. "All right, my brothers and sisters, it's our turn. The fate of Dathas rests on this battle. Give it everything you've got. Forward. Turret 15, fire the neutralizer beam on my mark. All weapons and shuttles use that beam as your signal to engage. Select your targets according to the battle plan." The lurch of acceleration washed over him, and Edward felt utterly out of place in this command seat. He recalled his days of solo combat, the countless guerrilla skirmishes in the forests on the dunes within the towns. He let out a soft sigh and murmured to himself, "That kind of battle suits me better." The enemy flagship loomed into view. A pale violet beam struck it with pinpoint accuracy, but nothing happened. Everyone on the bridge froze, turning in unison to stare at Edward. "What are you looking at me for? Carry out your orders." Edward snapped, a flicker of anger in his eyes. He knew their hesitation. Even Alina couldn't guarantee the neutralizer would work. A full main battery salvo. The Nova-class energy shells struck the target unopposed, erupting in a blinding blaze. Edward's eyes lit up. "Close in. Use our shields to absorb their secondary fire and create an opening for the shuttles to take them out." A series of explosions rocked the Lushel. Edward was thrown against the deck, his clothes instantly morphing into a sealed spacesuit. "What's going on? Where are our shields?" Edward demanded. Alina's voice echoed through the bridge. "I'm sorry. I didn't anticipate him disabling our shields before I could neutralize his. I should have told you to turn them off before firing. Damn it. Full speed ahead. Even if we have to ram them, we're taking that ship down." Edward hadn't anticipated the Lushel losing its shields. "Shuttles. Every secondary cannon you knock out gives us a fighting chance." He clenched his fists, gambling everything on this final push. By his precise calculations, the battered Lushel without shields against the enemy's full broadside could only survive for about 10 minutes. "The Lushel won't hold out," Winshell stated calmly, standing beside Edward. "I don't need her to hold out forever. Just long enough," Edward said quietly. On the command console, the status indicators for the various combat units flickered from green to red, some going dark entirely. Edward stood unmoved, his gaze fixed on the growing form of the enemy flagship like a wolf eyeing its prey. Suddenly Martin's voice crackled over the bridge comms. "Commander, the Auriga cruiser has completed its objective and is returning to support." "Hold on." Then more reports flooded in. "Commander, the Beryl cruiser has completed its objective and is returning. The Sasimo destroyer has completed its objective and is returning. Commander, the Beastridge cruiser has completed its objective and is returning." Against the pitch-black backdrop of space, the swift Auriga streaked across like a meteor. Countless shuttles swarmed around it, resembling insects gnawing at a colossal beast. The Auriga relentlessly retaliated with its onboard weapon systems, each salvo obliterating several shuttles and igniting bursts of sparks in the dark void. "The numbers are too overwhelming," said Chief of Staff Li Fu. "Indeed, a single interstellar warship can carry 1,000 shuttles. How many are surrounding us?" Captain Mating asked the operator ahead of him. "Approximately 250, replied the operator, his head down, fingers dancing across the controls. "We'd better not deploy our 50 shuttles. They'd be shot down before leaving the hangar. Let's wait until we rendezvous with the flagship." "What's the hull status?" Mating continued. "The hull can still hold, though the residential sector is severely damaged. The other areas are relatively intact. Li Fu, consult with the other captains to see if we can converge for mutual defense." Mating returned to his seat, opened his helmet, and fumbled around his body. To his surprise, he pulled out a pipe. "They're already closing in except for the Byron destroyer. It lost power in the last engagement and is drifting along its original trajectory," said Li Fu. "Hold on, everyone. The commander's tactics are working. A victory is within sight." With that, Mating lit it. On the bridge of the Luxir, Edward was shaken by tremors. Wang's ear steadied him, but Edward's gaze remained fixed on the tactical display, tracking the positions of every ship. All surviving vessels converge near the Auriga. 3 destroyers cluster together with 3 cruisers on the perimeter. All shuttles move to support them immediately. Cruisers, find an opportunity to launch your shuttles. Edward's orders were swiftly executed by the crew as if they were extensions of his own limbs. The seamless command filled him with exhilaration. We still have 8 main cannons, said Wingseer. They have 12. There's still a chance, Edward replied, eyes still glued to the tactical display. If possible, I hope you can save the Luxier, Wingseer said, lowering his head. I was its former captain. Edward turned to look at Wingseer, surprised that this burly man had once commanded the Luxier. Cannon 15's core has been replaced. Rejoining the fight, announced Mirk, his youthful voice echoing across the bridge. Everyone's spirits lifted. 3 operators said, our sectors are too damaged for us to remain here. We'll head to Cannon 17, which is less damaged, and try to restore its combat capability. They quickly ran toward the hatch. Go. Good luck. Edward's calm voice lingered in the air. On the bridge of the Tadier, Sergi roared in fury amid a series of explosions. A 22-8 disparity, and they got wiped out. Useless. His rage along with his spittle sprayed onto the operators before him. We were ambushed. With no time to adjust formation, we lost a third of our strength in the first clash. Their destroyers are all equipped with Stellar-class main cannons. They punch a hole through a cruiser with a single shot, reported Lafier. Report. Our secondary battery system is over 90% destroyed. What are the shuttles doing? Sergi slammed his fist on the console. By the time our shuttles arrived, the battle there was essentially over. The enemy's surviving ships have already grouped up. Recall the shuttles, Lafier suggested, his heart heavy with despair, yet his military instinct drove him to propose. Main battery system damage exceeds 40%, the operator's report struck Sergi like a hammer. He staggered and collapsed into his command chair. We need your orders, sir, said an operator. Another main cannon has been destroyed. Retreat. Sergi, pale-faced, gave the order through gritted teeth. The operators, as if granted amnesty, scrambled to execute the command. Several ran out of the bridge, and soon more followed, as if realizing the situation. Damn it. I said retreat, not abandon ship. Sergi tried to rise and stop them, but another explosion threw him to the floor. A massive gash tore open the bridge. The terrifying decompression returned, flinging several operators out into the dark, freezing void. The repair system activated with robots spraying nanoparticles to patch the breach, but the horrifying sight had already shattered the morale of the panicked operators. They scrambled out of the bridge, heading for the escape pods. The enemy's other ships are within effective firing range. It's over, Lafier said to Sergi, who was lying on the floor. The continuous tremors indicated the increasing density of enemy fire. Sergi struggled to his feet. You should go too. Lafier gave a bitter smile. Where to? There aren't enough lifeboats. Do you think those who rush to the escape pods will wait for anyone else? He leaned against the wall and sat down. On the bridge of the Luxier, Edward's voice echoed through the ship's intercom. Hold on, everyone. Keep the Luxier steady. Mating and the others are almost in position. Cannon 17 is back online. Joining the fight. Engine room hit. Power output reduced by 50%. Route all energy to the weapon systems. Edward ordered. Cannon 15 has been hit. Temporarily out of action, under repair. Elena's voice came through the bridge comm. Elena, how are you? Hold on, everyone, hold on. Edward's voice cracked, almost a roar. He feared not his own sacrifice, but a life without Elena. Only cannons 3, 7, 14, and 17 are still operational. Cannon 2 is completely destroyed. We are 3,000 kilometers from the enemy flagship. The Auriga has reached firing position and is engaging. Hard to starboard. All hands brace for collision. Edward issued commands calmly. Report receiving several distress signals from the enemy fleet. Report all enemy main cannons have gone. Edward was stunned for a moment, then overjoyed. Cease fire. No. Prioritize destroying their main cannons. Dispatch Marines to seize the ships. We don't have Marines. Wingseer said awkwardly. We didn't expect them to abandon ship. Edward slapped his forehead, remembering that he had decided against bringing Marines. Due to the hasty departure, he hadn't had time to select Marine personnel. He said, any operators with ground combat experience step forward. Follow me to seize the enemy ships. Wingseer, you're in command temporarily. Edward checked his weapons and equipment aboard the troop transport, preparing for the imminent shipboarding operation. He lightly tapped the communicator on his wrist, glanced at the 10 temporary Marine Corps members on the channel, and said, once we board, I'll lead Alpha Team straight to the bridge. Kesher, and you take Bravo Team to the engine room. Avoid combat if possible. Make sure the engine room remains intact once you get there. Escorted by several shuttles, the troop transport landed on the underside of the Tidar. Grappling hooks extended firmly, securing the small craft to the hull. According to the scanners, there are living quarters directly below. This is a perfect entry point. The pilot said, drifting from his seat, and opened the hatch at the bottom of the craft, beginning to cut through the steel plating with a complex device. How long will it take? Edward asked, holding his shield. Very soon, sir. Very soon. Is the enemy's gravity system still operational? Edward continued. A crewman pressed a few controls by the hatch, replying 0.8 standard gravity. It appears to be running normally. With a loud clang, a gust of wind rushed in. Quick, quick, quick. Repair bots will seal this hole before we know it. the pilot said, grabbing his weapon. Edward was the first through the opening, the rest of the team following in quick succession. All right. Execute your missions, he said, kicking open the cabin door. In the corridor, smoke-belching pipes, flickering lights, the shrill blare of alarms, and the screams of the crew all mixed into a chaotic symphony. He activated his energy shield, straining to pinpoint the source of the screams, and moved toward it. We need to get to the bridge. Which way? Edward asked the wounded soldier. Clutching his bleeding thigh, the soldier said, give me a shot of morphine first. A team member stepped forward, administered a dose of morphine from a medkit, and sprayed a medical sealant over the wound for basic treatment. The wounded soldier looked at the medic with gratitude, saying, follow this corridor straight to the bridge. Our commander has already issued the order to abandon ship. You shouldn't meet much resistance. Stay here and wait for the follow-up team to process you, Edward said, then led the squad toward the bridge. After a long advance, they finally reached the bridge. To their surprise, the reinforced blast doors were wide open. Keshorn's voice came through the helmet comms. Commander, we've secured the engine room. No resistance encountered. Hold your position. We're at the bridge, Edward said, making several hand gestures. Four team members rushed in pairs through the bridge entrance, reporting clear over the comms. He stepped onto the bridge and saw Serki collapsed on the floor with Raphael crouched beside him. After ordering 2 crewmen to guard them, he walked straight to the command console. Activating the fleet-wide communication system, he broadcast. All units, this is Commander Edward of the Free Federation's DOS's fleet. Your flagship has been captured, and all other capital ships have been destroyed. Activating the fleet-wide communication system, he broadcast. All units, this is Commander Edward of the Free Federation's DOS's fleet. Your flagship has been captured, and all other capital ships have been What do you intend to do with us? Serki asked. And you are? Edward inquired. I am Serki, commander of the 3rd Fleet of the Gorgon Star State. This is my chief of staff, Raphael. Serki straightened his uniform, trying to muster the composure to stand, but failed after several attempts. Commander Serki, I am Edward, commander of the Free Federation's DOS's fleet, he said, removing his helmet to reveal his youthful face. Truly, youth is a marvel. I assumed we were dealing with a seasoned federal veteran, Raphael remarked, showing no sign of distress over his capture. What are your intentions for us? Serki asked again. That depends on orders from higher command, Edward replied, turning away. He operated the console for a moment, establishing a link with the Lucier. After a brief exchange with Winchell, he settled into the command chair, propped his legs up on the console, and casually gestured to a nearby crewman, signaling for a cup of tea. A cup of hot tea was soon delivered. He took a gentle sip and remarked, I have to say the Tidar's tea is far better than ours. A day later, the tale of the Free Federation's DOS's fleet annihilating a neighboring fleet at an astonishing 1-3 disadvantage in combat power and capturing their enemy's flagship spread across the entire galaxy. The DOS's fleet's masterful use of the stellar environment for a successful ambush was written into military textbooks across the Federation and even the Empire. Speculation ran rampant about the origins of this young commander, named Edward, with a legend even emerging that he was the son of the DOS's star god. Rumors and myths proliferated, growing more extravagant with each telling. The starfield was still busy with combat shuttles coming and going. Merely processing the battlefield, recovering salvage, and searching for survivors consumed all their energy. Edward decided to take a hands-off approach, delegating all these complex tasks to Winchell, and retreated to his quarters, staring at a star chart in deep thought. We're swamped with work, and you're here taking it easy. His gaze lifted from the star chart to meet Alina's annoyed expression. My little wildcat, a commander needs time for deep thinking. You can think properly just by staring at a star chart. What about casualty care, POW processing, power restoration training schedules? Are you just ignoring all of that? Alina said, sitting down beside him. Well, that's what Winchell is for. Edward scratched his head, adding, besides, Dad told me that DOS's is about to be fully integrated into the Federation system. Just thinking about that news drains all my motivation. That was bound to happen eventually. Besides, the Federation's ideals are Dad's ideals. As long as the people of DOS's can live in peace and prosperity, that's what matters. What are your ideals? Alina said, stroking his hand. My ideals. My ideal is a simple life, an acre of land, a couple of oxen, a wife, kids, and a warm hearth, he said, rising and pulling the giggling Alina into his arms, then twisting to pin her down on the bed. Commander Edward, please report to the bridge. The voice from the intercom came at the most inopportune moment. Don't go, Alina pleaded, cupping his face with a bashful smile. Emboldened, he quickened his pace and shedding his clothes. Commander Edward, please report to the bridge immediately. The intercom's voice sounded again, as if taunting him. Damn it. Alina, wait for me. I'll be right back, he said, hastily pulling his clothes back on and exiting the cabin. Arriving at the bridge, Winchell looked at Edward with a knowing smirk, then said, I do apologize for interrupting your private moment. Edward was taken aback, quickly asking, how did you know? Winchell handed him a handkerchief, pointing at Edward's face. Commander Walter Benba of the Free Federation's 3rd Fleet is asking for you. You might want to wipe the lipstick off your face first. On the arched bridge of the Lushower, Edward was conversing with General Walter Binba through the communicator. This general before him was a stark contrast to General Bear. Bear exuded a wolfish cunning and ruthlessness, while this one carried the biting chill of a heavy sword swung directly at you. Well, General Walter, I've made my decision to retire, Edward stated. Edward, since Dosal has been incorporated into the Free Federation, you are now a citizen of the Federation. I once again ask you to contribute your strength for the Federation and its citizens. General Walter was clearly reluctant to let Edward hang up his uniform so easily. Once we return to Das's star and complete the fleet handover, I will retire, Edward said, offering no further explanation, his mind set on fulfilling his promise to Alina. Young man, the Empire's days are numbered, Walter pressed on. Their technology stagnates, their officers are incompetent, their soldiers are cowards. Don't you want to seize this chaotic era to carve out your own grand legacy? General Walter felt Edward's retirement was a great waste, believing he was burying his talents. I've been thinking all day. If Andre Starbase remains impenetrable, even if we convert Isoda into a starbase, it won't be able to rival it. Without taking Andre, our star sector will remain under constant harassment from the Empire. How can we speak of any grand undertaking? Edward looked disdainfully at the general's grand rhetoric and cut to the heart of the problem. That's precisely why the Federation needs command talents like you, Edward. I believe that with our free alliance united in purpose, we will surely breach the Andre Starbase, General Walter declared passionately. An impossibility is an impossibility, just like you can't bite the back of your own head, Edward retorted, rubbing his brow, feeling his patience snap. He cut off General Walter before he could speak again. Even if we convert Isoda into a starbase, its position relative to the star bridge won't allow it to achieve the same effect as Andre Starbase. Andre Starbase is like a bottle cap. It prevents things from entering the bottle and also stops the fine wine inside from spilling out. It's precisely because of Andre Starbase that the Empire can continuously send warships through the star bridge. As for Isoda, the star bridge is completely outside its effective striking radius. That's exactly why we must take Isoda to counter Andre, General Walter argued. What would we even achieve by taking Isoda? Edward countered. Build a starbase under a hail of Nova-class bombardment. We've walked right into their trap. The Empire wants us to see that possibility and drag us into a war of attrition. Edward dropped all pretense of politesse. Let me tell you what will happen. The moment Federation fleet enters Isoda's space, Imperial ships will pour out of the star bridge like a swarm of stars. At that point, if you advance, you'll sacrifice your fleet to buy precious construction time. If you retreat, their fleet will bombard Isoda into a scorched wasteland. Go back and forth a few times, and our economy will be ruined. General Walter was stunned, his lips trembling as if to speak. Edward, seemingly possessed, continued. By then our people will be starving, burdened by soaring prices. By then the hospital shelves will be empty, and our elderly and sick will have no one to treat them. By then our children will cry to us asking for a cake for their birthday, and you will be powerless to provide it. All the officers on the bridge looked at each other, their hearts stirred by Edward's intense words. They had all risen from the Das's resistance, and they stood up, their gazes fixed on him. General Walter's face flushed with anger, but then he let out a low chuckle, his anger subsiding. You sound like you're trying to convince yourself. Edward was taken aback, a flicker of light falling from his eyes. He shook his head. Unfortunately, there's nothing I can do. So you're saying someone else can? Alina's voice came from behind him. Edward turned to see Alina's sweet smile, which seemed to morph into words. You've been quietly brooding all day, so you must have figured out something interesting. Tell the general. Turning back, Edward met the gazes of all the officers on the bridge. He felt their support and resolve, and the tangled knot in his heart began to ease. He took a deep breath, his decision made. In the city of Perlon on Dasas, a gentle sea breeze swept through Brenda's beautiful long hair. She rose slowly from her beach chair and gave a slight wave to an elderly man approaching from the distance. Oh, how I envy you. You've completely washed your hands of it all. General Bear yelled from afar. Aren't you almost there yourself? Brenda said, offering him the chair. Oh, it's all meetings so troublesome. Hey, do you think Edward will come after us? General Bear asked, taking the coconut Brenda offered. Brenda chuckled. No, Edward is a man with a deep sense of duty. He's just lazy and needs a push. Alina's temperament fits his perfectly. Right, that kid's like toothpaste, you have to squeeze him to get anything out, Bear said, setting the coconut aside. When I finally retire, shouldn't we? Well, I need to give you a proper title. Humph. Brenda snorted, rolling her eyes at him. Bear immediately sprang up from his chair. Don't humph me. I've got it all planned. We'll settle down in Perlin and maybe have a couple of kids. More kids. I'm 43. Besides, don't you already have Alina? Brenda glared at him. Bear quickly put his arm around her shoulder, leaning in. I want a child of my own too. Brenda pushed his arm away. What's the story with Alina? Bear fell into step beside her. She's adopted. Edward was too young to remember. I've never been married in my life. Think about it, will you? Brenda smiled and pinched his neck. You old devil. I always wondered how someone as ugly as you could have such a pretty daughter. How can I trust a word you say? On the beach, two sets of footprints stretched into the distance close together before being washed away by the rising tide. Edward stood with his hands clasped behind his back on the observation deck of the Starport Command Center, gazing at the crater-pocked hull of the Lushel docked in the harbor, his mind already weaving through the threads of a battle plan. A pair of arms wrapped around his waist from behind, and he turned his head, casting an affectionate glance at the newcomer. Little Wildcat, why did you slip out so early instead of getting more sleep? He murmured, tucking a stray lock of hair behind Alina's ear with a tender gesture. Big donkey, we're heading to Thomas Star. I couldn't sleep a wink. Alina rose on her tiptoes and pressed a kiss to Edward's lips. Indeed, the capital of the Free Federation awaits. I wonder what kind of people they truly are, Edward remarked. Alina moved to a nearby seat and settled down, saying, they shouldn't be too difficult to get along with. Look at Winshell and the others. They're already quite deferential to you. Edward shook his head. I have no desire to conquer or dominate anyone. I only need to persuade a single person to adopt our plan. Once it succeeds, my objective will be fulfilled. And what exactly is your objective? Alina asked, crossing one leg over the other with a casual air. I want to secure peace within this star sector. He said as he walked toward her, then continued. After all, we're going to build a life here. I don't want our children born into the flames of war. Thoughts of his own family torn apart by conflict steeled his resolve. If the Federation's governor accepts your plan, what are the odds of success? Alina asked. 3 in 10. Edward replied, raising 3 fingers. That's far too low, Alina said with a shake of her head. If the Federation fails to take Fort Andre, we'll be back under the Empire's dominion within 5 years. Something the Federation simply cannot accept. Edward leaned down and settled beside Alina, continuing, the ship sent for us should arrive shortly. Let's set this aside for now. I still have some details to work through. Alina obediently fell silent, tilting her head to rest against his shoulder. A day later, the Federation cruiser, 5-colored worm, docked, carrying Edward and over 50 officers toward the capital star of the Free Federation, Tama. Along the way, they endured 7 hyperspace fold jumps, quickly reaching the vicinity of their target star system, after which they ignited the fusion engines and began conventional cruising. No matter how many times I experience a hyperspace fold, I just can't get used to it, Winshell said, struggling to mask his discomfort, though his pallid face betrayed the churning turmoil in his stomach. You feel unwell? Edward asked, genuinely puzzled. Perhaps, sir, you were born for the stars, Winshell said, steadying himself. Edward, baffled, directed a questioning look at him. Winshell continued. You see, sir, on my homeworld there's a legend. We believe humanity originally originated on a single planet, and only later, for reasons lost to time, did we embark on interstellar migration. The early hyperspace folding devices were far from perfect, with severe side effects. Only a select few could endure them, and we call those people born for the stars. They scattered humanity's seeds across every corner of the galaxy, and from that the Star Empire was born. Edward grinned. That's clearly just a myth. I've come across a similar tale in an old book, Alina interjected. What was that planet called? In our legends we call it Earth. Winshell said. Right? What a strange name. By that logic, our dasas should be called Sandball, Alina laughed. I once searched for this planet in the star charts, but there's no world named Earth anywhere in the entire galaxy, Winshell said, thumping his chest to dispel the last lingering nausea. It's likely that a gap in our history caused it to be forgotten, Alina mused thoughtfully. Or perhaps we came from the Andromeda galaxy, or somewhere even farther. Edward chimed in with keen interest, savoring the chance to discuss something other than warfare. Even the nearest galaxy, Andromeda, is over 10 million light-hours away. No hyperspace folding device could ever manage a jump beyond 10,000 light-hours, Alina said, unconvinced by his speculation. Winshell rubbed his chin in thought for a moment, then said, but it might actually be possible. Have you ever heard of the ancient? I know. Near the Sagittarius spiral arm, there are countless artificial constructs, some as small as a star, others as vast as a nebula. I've always wanted to see them. I can't fathom how those constructs maintain such enormous mass without collapsing into black holes. Alina gazed at the starry river beyond the viewport, her face glowing with longing. Perhaps those constructs are the very ships we use to travel to the Milky Way, Winshell said, nodding as if had already settled the matter. Edward shook his head. No, that doesn't hold up logically. Think about it, we cross millions of light-hours only to arrive with technology that's actually regressed. How would you explain that? Alina scratched her head thoughtfully. That's a fair point. But speaking of Earth, it might have been flung out of the galaxy long ago, turned into a cold star. You two keep mentioning cold stars. You mean rogue planets, right? Winshell said. Could it have been cast out? Edward murmured to himself, lost in thought, when a sudden clarity washed over him. Alina had unwittingly provided the final piece of his battle plan, and a far more refined strategy crystallized in his mind. Alina nudged Winshell just as he was about to speak again, and at his puzzled look, she tilted her chin toward Edward. Seeing the commander lost in deep contemplation, Winshell wisely fell silent. From a distance, Tomo star resembled a colossal head of cabbage, its surface a mosaic of verdant green and frosty white. Devoid of moons and spinning with excessive speed, it looked as though some cosmic hand had flattened the celestial body with a mighty spatula. How tall are those mountains? Alina exclaimed, her excitement bubbling over like a child's. I don't know, Winchell replied. All I know is that many of their peaks pierce the atmosphere itself. That's impossible. Edward gasped in disbelief. He fumbled for his tactical map, tapping at its surface in a futile attempt to access the Tomo star sector. Finding his clearance insufficient, he sheepishly tucked it back into his pocket. Tomo star's gravity is peculiar. Alina observed, her gaze fixed on the towering ranges. It still holds sway at those altitudes, anchoring the snow to the peaks, so it isn't flung away. She continued to study the colossal mountains as she spoke. Oh, and one more thing, Winchell added, donning his military cap. Don't remove your multipurpose uniforms once we land. The AI will monitor your vitals. If you can't handle the gravity ITLL, alert us, and someone will escort you back to the ship. That's not ice, is it? Edward mused, pulling on his own cap. In the vacuum of space, with such low pressure, ice would sublimate in an instant. Edward finished speaking and adjusted his cap. You really should have paid more attention in school, Alina chided, straightening her uniform. Take a comet, for example. It's essentially made of ice. But if it's massive enough, its gravity can hold onto those water molecules, preventing them from escaping. She then turned to Winchell. What's the gravity here? About 2 standard GS, he answered. With that, he was the first out the hatch, leaving the other two rooted to the spot in stunned silence. Hours later, Edward and Alina stood panting before the grand archway of Star Fortress. The mere 2-hour shuttle ride had sapped every ounce of their strength. Even sitting is exhausting, Alina grumbled. Tell me about it, Edward agreed. Let's go check in. Winchell led them through a labyrinth of corridors until they reached a spacious hall. Get yourselves ready, Winchell instructed, glancing at his watch. Marshal Ralbo will be here to see you in about half an hour. I need to report back to the operations department now. Alina simply grunted in acknowledgement before collapsing onto a sofa motionless. Edward meanwhile synced his personal computer and projected a star chart into the center of the hall. He studied it intently, mentally rehearsing the perilous plan once more. 2 elderly men appeared in the doorway, peering inside. Neither Alina, sprawled on the sofa, nor Edward, lost in thought, noticed their arrival. Even when one of the old men stood right beside him, Edward remained oblivious. Is this the region near the Isoda star system? The golden-haired elder inquired. Startled, Edward turned to face the 2 men. Their plain attire put him at ease. Ah, yes, he replied. And you are? The golden-haired elder waved a dismissive hand, ignoring the question. Impressive star chart, he remarked instead. Seems you have your own sources of intelligence. Alina cracked an eye open from her sprawled position, then shut it again. The Empire's encrypted comms are child's play to me, she muttered dismissively. The 2 elders exchanged an amused glance. The black-haired one made to step forward, but was stopped by his companion. Young man, the golden-haired elder began. Let's suppose you're the supreme commander of Andre Star Fortress, and am the supreme commander of the Free Federation. Let's run a war game. Edward, still unsure of the stranger's identity, opened his mouth to ask again. But the golden-haired elder pressed on. Since the Empire is on the defensive, I'll make the first move. First, I'll concentrate my 1st, 3rd, 9th, and 13th fleets to clear the Isoda system of enemy forces. Then I'll deploy troop transports to land and seize Isoda, establishing a planetary-scale Star Fortress. I won't take the bait, Edward countered. I'll pull all my warships back within the protective range of Andre Star Fortress main cannons. You just sit there and watch the Federation build a fortress, the golden-haired elder asked, puzzled. That fortress will take at least 5 years to complete. Isoda orbits its star every 2 standard years, and at its closest approach to Andre Star Fortress, it's a mere 0.5 light hours away. My fortress cannons can't quite reach it, but I can use them as a shield, concentrate my fleet, and launch an attack on Isoda. With those cannons covering my back, I don't have to worry about being outflanked. I can employ my tactics with relative freedom. Edward spoke with unwavering confidence. He had run this simulation in his mind countless times. So what? The golden-haired elder retorted. I'll concentrate my fleet and keep the Imperial Navy out of it. The current warship ratio between the Empire and the Federation is 3-2. Clever tactics are one of the few advantages the Federation has. If you engage in a heat and slugfest, aren't you just crippling yourself? You'd be no match for the Imperial fleet. Edward continued, his tone steady. If you pull back to buy space for your tactics, I'll split my fleet into 3 divisions or more and swing around your flanks to strike Isoda from the rear. Even if you divide your forces, there will be a weak point. I'll smash through it and destroy Isoda's unfinished fortifications. Once the objective is complete, all my ships will immediately retreat back within range of my fortress cannons. The golden-haired elder fell silent. Edward pressed his advantage. Our average exchange ratio with the Empire is 2-3. Let's run the simulation with the Empire splitting into 3. The Empire would destroy Isota's under construction works at the cost of 60 of its fleet. That's a loss the Empire can absorb considering the immense industrial machine that lies behind their star bridge. The black-haired elder finally spoke. At this rate, after 3 such exchanges, our industrial capacity would be unable to keep up. If the Federation wants to win, they'd either have to take Andre Star Fortress, or the Empire's own backyard would have to catch fire and throw them into chaos. Alina chimed in, attempting to raise a hand but failing. Taking Andre. I dream of it, the golden-haired elder said. Tell me your plan. Edward, realizing he still didn't know the man's name, finally asked, And who might you be, sir? I am Akila Asim, governor of the Free Federation, the golden-haired elder announced, gesturing to his companion. And this is Marshal Ralbo Rod, commander-in-chief of the Federation Armed Forces. At the mention of the governor's presence, Alina struggled on the sofa, attempting to rise. Easy there, young lady, the governor said with a smile. You've just arrived, and you don't look well. Best stay put. Governor Marshal, Edward said, snapping to attention and saluting. I am Edward Elric, and this is my science advisor, Alina Campos. Edward, the governor began, his tone turning serious. That war game you just played is precisely the situation we're facing. I hear you came here with a plan. Let's hear it. The governor smiled expectantly.